Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning at our City Council study session. We'll go ahead and get started. Connie, could you call the roll?
Patterson.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
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 Johnston.
Here.
Blair.
Here.
Lavin.
Here. Thank you. We'll go to agenda item number 2, which is African Sister City Subcommittee update. Representatives from the African Sister City Subcommittee will discuss the subcommittee's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations.
Excuse us, we're playing musical chairs. We appreciate your time today, Mayor Glad and members of the City Council, although we must express our great disconcerting disappointment that Ms. Adamson is no longer our representative on the Sister Cities.
And
she was
really
faithful in,
Yeah.
and we're still waiting. We're still waiting. There's an empty chair.
Right here it is.
So we want you to appoint somebody who's as interested in our programs as Ms. Adams has been. So just keep that in mind.
All right.
We appreciate your time today, and we appreciate the city's support of the African Sister Cities, the Sister Cities Committee, Pocatello Sister Cities Africa Subcommittee. I'll get it out. We continue to try to support Cuermanguel in Burkina Faso, which is our sister city. We feel committed to them. We have a couple of diehard members like Ms. Peggy and I, but we continue to promote it with others in the community. We have just recently completed a project that we've been working on for 2 or 3 years to raise enough money for them to buy some kind of a conveyance from the village, which is considerably rural compared to the other areas of Cuermanguel, although most of Cuermanguel is pretty rural, or most of Burkina Faso. But our goal was to provide some kind of a conveyance so that they could get from the village to the nearest town of any size, which is about 40 kilometers away, so that they could convey people who are ill. We've participated in supporting a medical center in the village. We've purchased equipment for it, lighting for it, and that kind of thing in the past, but they needed something to convey people to larger areas. The only services are somewhat limited in the village itself, so we did finally complete that, and Ms. Johnson can talk a little bit about the money we raised for that. And we continue to support the educational programs that we've supported for all the years that we've been at committee. We introduced to you one of the young men from the village who we supported through college, and he's now going to ISU to school. I didn't invite him today, and I'm kind of hesitant to because he's working nights and he goes to school during the day. So poor guy doesn't get much sleep. So we try to minimize parading him around for display, but it's fun to have him here, and he's a great addition to our community. So we continue to promote our committee with other members. We've had people who've come for short periods of time and then have left us for various reasons. But despite struggling to keep a full committee, we, like Ms. Johnson, myself, Ms. Olson, and now we currently have Jennifer Parker, who's a school district employee who is also supporting, and she's a nurse, and she's also been pretty active on our committee. So we have a core group that's been pretty strong, and we continue to try to support Cuermanguel. I'm going to ask Ms. Johnson if she wants to talk about our future plans for some of the projects that the village has asked us to participate in. And looking for support in. We will continue to have fundraising efforts. The couple major things that we do is our potato sales in the fall. We appreciate those of you who buy potatoes from us in the fall. And then we do a fun run in April, and we do that using conjunction with other community groups to kind of partner with them. Most recently, we partnered with the after-school program and gotten kids involved and done some really fun things to make them aware of our activities with Cuermanguel. So, Ms. Johnson.
Before you move on, Mr. Mayor, could we ask our representatives to identify themselves with the camera?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely. I'm glad you caught that because it flew right past me.
My name is Kent Hobbs. I'm the chairman of the Pocatello Sister Cities Africa Subcommittee.
I'm Peggy Johnson, and I am the secretary-treasurer.
And she's the long-standing founding member of the committee. So.
Like Kent said, that we had finished, we raised $20,000 to send to them to help with their medical needs. And in doing that, that was probably a 3 to 4 year project that we worked on Took quite a long time, and we are really relieved to be done with it. That's all I can say. We're happy for them, but relieved to be done with it. Right now, we just want to focus. I know I give you one of these every year, and one of these years I'm hoping to get a letter from each one of you with a $100 bill in it. But currently we are working on the education of the students. This has been a big boon to them that they can send their children to school. It's not something that they had before we became partners. They would go 3 years to school, lay out, and then the next group would go to school. So like first, second, third grade would go, and then those kids would lay out for a year, and then fourth, fifth, and sixth would go. After we built the school, now everyone goes to school all the time. So now they have more kids graduating from grade school than ever before, and they have more kids going on to junior high and high school, and therefore college. Because of our efforts, the government felt a little embarrassed by what we had done in the village, and so they came and built them a small junior high. Not all the kids can go there, but some of them can. And then we help those kids who can't go to school there in the village for junior high and high school, and even for some college students. We help them who don't have the means to do it. And sometimes the kids don't need a full scholarship to go to school, which is $290 for the whole entire year. And that's for housing, books, and uniforms. And then for college, it's $590. $295 and $590, there you go. And they all don't need a full scholarship, but so if you do pay a full scholarship, it will be dispersed, and maybe you'll help more kids than you know. And we do have our contact person, Noel Terry, his daughter, who the first time we went over there was a baby, and now she has just completed her first year of college. And she has been accepted to medical school. So that is a big deal for them. And it's a big deal, for us.
Yeah.
This will be the first person from the village to become a doctor. So it's a big deal. And we've had a lot of kids graduate from college with our help, which, you know, they, like I've said before, 1988 was the last one they had from college until we started sponsoring some of these kids. And now they have a lot of college graduates. And the educational group for the government of Burkina Faso is looking at this and seeing what advances they have made and how they are working with us to ensure their children's future. And they do have electricity coming their way, but when that will be, we don't know. And so, like Kent said, we are working on fundraisers. Our two main ones are our Sister Cities race. It's a 5K race, and that's coming up in April, and we're working on that now. And then in the fall, we will have our potato sales, and then we also, through the fall and winter, go to a lot of craft shows and sell the African crafts that we receive from the village. They send those to us for us to sell. So that's one part that they do to help raise money, and then the other part is that once we send them the funds for whatever project we have, then they do the work to complete it. So like with the school, they built the school. And then with this ambulance, they will do the legwork and find the ambulance that they need and take care of that. And it's the same with the kids. The kids apply, and then they go through the formalities of choosing the students that will receive the scholarships and how much they receive. They have full committees set up on everything, and it's really wonderful. It's just like my second home. And I often have dreams about it.
And we appreciate the council's support that you've given us in the past, and appreciate your allowing us to continue to pursue our efforts to try to help these people. Our community is very generous. You know, when we go out and we talk to people and tell them what we're doing, people step up frequently and support us. And, you know, we have a couple of farmers who've been really consistent in donating the potatoes. We don't have to purchase those at all, and we get all that donated. So it's pure money going towards the effort. So that went from that sale. So we appreciate it.
And Albert Wada always donates the boxes for us.
Yeah.
So better give him a plug.
Yeah. Any questions that we can answer?
Mr. Mayor, Kent and Peggy, would you please describe the way in which the finances are handled? I know you're a 501c3, but so many of our things go through the city, and you appear to be very independent. Describe for me, please.
We are a 501(c), and so we just collect the funds, and then as we send them over, we have a bank account, or the committee over there has a bank account, so we send the funds to that committee, and then they disperse them to the projects that are designed, and we've agreed between the two, our committee here and the committee there, the projects that they've designated and we've decided to support.
We also receive an accounting of where the funds go with each project, and with the school, that was our other big project that we had, and we had a full accounting on every dime. It's the same with the students. We know how much each student receives and how much was spent for other things as well.
Follow-up question. When was the last time a member of the committee was in our sister city in Africa?
We went in 2010.
2010.
Yeah, we had made some thoughts about going, I think it was last year, but circumstances, you know, Burkina Faso's always been a fairly stable country politically, but with the African Spring, there was a little bit of upheaval in the country as well, so we kind of backed away from that a little bit. You know, we look at the State Department recommendations for travel, and Mali is to the north of them, you know, and there was that disturbance in Mali a couple years ago when the French went in and were bombing insurgent groups, and so, you know, it's a little tenuous to go there for, you know, to consider your personal safety. So we'd still like to go back again because it's just, the people are very warm and welcoming, and they're very appreciative of our efforts here, and so we've not set a date, but we'd like to go back again soon.
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
It sounds like you have the financial records. The council would like to see where the money goes, where the money's raised, and see a financial accounting of the finances of this subcommittee.
Okay.
We can do that.
Okay, any other questions? Super. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll move on to Pocatello Development Authority update. Representatives from the Pocatello Development Authority will discuss the authority's goals and projects as well as council's policies and expectations.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. We're glad to be here. Before we start, I really want to comment how touching the work that committee is doing. I don't think I've sat through a report before. And honestly, I wasn't aware that the committee existed, and the efforts they have to help children and youth in other countries are fabulous. Kind of pulls on the heartstrings a little bit. I'm afraid our report doesn't really do that.
Tries.
Tries, but not in the same way, that's for sure. My name is Scott Smith. We have Melanie Gigley. I'm the chairman of the Pocatello Development Authority. And Melanie is the executive director at the moment. So we're here to give our report. Some of you may have had an opportunity to participate on the PDA board. Steve Brown was the city representative for a while, and he's no longer there. And I have heard rumors that Councilman Johnston might have this appointment. We'll be thrilled to see him come to our meetings. We've seen Councilman Adamson attend occasionally, and every time we make a report here, I welcome anyone to come and sit in on the meetings. You're always welcome. For those city councilmen or anyone on the city council who may not really understand what the PDA does, I'll just kind of give a very small summary or snapshot of it. The PDA is, under Idaho law, it's considered an urban renewal agency. It was organized many years ago, and its primary purpose is to undertake the redevelopment and rehabilitation of the city of Pocatello. Areas in town that might be blighted or in need of some kind of help and assistance and development, this is where we can sometimes come into the picture and help with that. By law, once a year we have to come give a report to the city council, and that's what we're here to do today. The report is about our activities from 2017, from last year. As I go through this, please feel free to stop me and ask questions at any time. You don't have to wait till the very end if you don't want to. The PDA, by law, is able to establish what are called urban renewal areas. You might often hear these referred to as TIF districts. And if it's an area approved by the city council to be designated as an urban renewal district, it can be. And when it is, and there's a process for it, then the PDA is able to leverage the tax increment from those districts to use for development within that district. And that's sort of the general idea of what's going on here. Right now, there are 4 urban renewal areas, 4 TIF districts in the city limits. And they've been around for a little while, and so you've probably heard about these, and so I'll just kind of report on the status of these 4. The first is the North Yellowstone Urban Renewal Area. It was established in 2004. And to give you an idea of where it's located, it's the area of Costco, Bed Bath & Beyond, Lowe's, McKenzie River Pizza, and it expands a little bit further. But all of that development up there was initiated through the establishment of this particular TIF district. The PDA, through this development, remains obligated on certain bonded debt. I'm happy to report that through the tax increment, we are easily making those payments, and it's and the accounting for this district in this area is very healthy. We did have some unbonded debt, which was essentially a grant to Costco to help them come in at the time. I can say that that's been fully satisfied. In 2017, the last payment was made. So again, as far as the PDA is concerned, North Yellowstone has honestly, I don't want to over-exaggerate this, but I feel it's been a raving success. If this is the kind of district that we could do time and time again, we would be very, very happy. And that area up there just continues to grow and seems to do well for the city. So that was the first urban renewal area. The second one is the Naval Ordnance Plant. And some of the businesses located in there are SME Steel, Virginia Transformer, Eaton Metal, Atco, Western Industrial. It's been a TIF district for quite a while at this point. Obviously, I think our number one concern and goal there is to see if we can make it look nicer for the city and to also make it a little bit more usable and enticing for people to come in and use those buildings for their businesses.
Scott, does that include the FBI?
It doesn't include the FBI.
Thank you.
They seem to get along quite well without our help.
Imagine that.
But no, they're not within this particular TIF district. For the year 2017, it's been very quiet over there. The PDA, our group, we have no debt obligations right now in there. Although we do have an account which tax increment from that district is going into that's typically used, again, for the purposes I've stated with this particular district. Not much has happened in 2017, and primarily because I'm not sure if the city council is aware, but there's a federal lawsuit over a potential sale and who really has the ownership and has rights. And until that sort of gets resolved and settled, the PDA is sort of sitting on the sidelines waiting to find out what happens there. And as it happens, then we can get more involved again in this particular district.
The sale of the naval ordnance plant?
Yes.
That's what you're...
Yeah, not the individual businesses,
Yeah.
but the whole plant.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was area number 2. Area number 3. This is the Pocatello Airport Urban Renewal Area. It is technically within city limits, and we have a district out there, and it's been there for a while. We do not have any debt out there. There's no debt obligations, but there is a healthy tax increment fund that we can use to do improvements out there and bring in businesses. In 2017, we were able to provide a $50,000 grant for electrical infrastructure that was used to entice and encourage Grishville Coppay to build a facility out there and bring in that particular business. What I understand it is they compress and shrink wrap hay to ship overseas, and we're glad they're there. They brought in jobs, and it's been great. And we're glad we're able to help with infrastructure, because that's something that stays there regardless of whether businesses move around or not. It'll be a good addition to that area, and hopefully encourage other businesses to move out there. That was area number 3. Then area number 4 is what's known as the North Portneuf Urban Renewal Area. This one is a little bit, I'll call it special. This is where the Hoku plant was located, near Great Western Malting. Okay. When Hoku went in, the PDA wasn't involved. I'll give you a little bit of history here. The PDA wasn't necessarily involved. Hoku went in there with these big plans to develop this silicon plant, and it didn't quite work out very well for Hoku, and they went into bankruptcy. Through this bankruptcy process, the city, for a short period, acquired ownership of the land, and then the PDA acquired it from the city. And we and the PDA are obligated to make certain payments to the city for that transfer of the land, and we are making those payments. Okay. Now, what are we doing with this area, with this land out there? It is being leased to a company who obtained ownership of the infrastructure, and the remaining facility of the building was sort of partially constructed. It's a company called VA Metals. VA Metals, because they own all the steel out there, is leasing the land from the PDA. Under their lease, they have an option to purchase it, which is what we hope they do. We're still really quite hopeful that they will purchase it, develop it in another way. That's our number one goal with this, with what's happening out there. But they have no obligation to purchase it. It's an option. If they don't purchase it and they take what they want from the property and leave, there's an obligation under the lease that they leave it cleaned up and everything removed. So which will put us in a better position of trying to utilize or sell that property later. So that's the plan there. And that's sort of what's happened this year, is it's been leased to VA Metal.
How long is that lease?
Honestly, it expired, I think, at the end of 2017 or in
Middle of
January
January.
2018. I'm trying to report on 2017, but right now at the beginning of 2018, we are renegotiating the lease with VA Metals. They've already requested an extension. What the PDA board ultimately decides, we'll see, but as I predict, it'll be extended to give them a little more time to decide about the option and decide about whether or not they're going to develop or what the plan is. So, but we're working with them and still quite hopeful for that area out there. That part of town could use a little bit of development. And having just an empty, vacant, half-built facility out there isn't doing the city any good. We're doing what we can to improve that situation.
It was real hot out there a couple of weeks ago in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
I was trying to be funny.
Keep trying, Jim.
I appreciate it, because again, my report feels kind of dry. I'm not really talking about helping children in Africa, which sounds a lot nicer to me. Okay, a couple other things. The PDA, those are the 4 TIF districts that the PDA manages at the moment. The PDA also manages or has what we call a general fund. And this money has been used outside of those 4 TIF districts just to benefit the city in the ways we've talked about. In 2017, we learned that Bully Dog was looking to leave American Falls and looking for somewhere else to relocate. We learned that they were actually seriously considering leaving the state of Idaho. And we were able, in cooperation with some others, to encourage them to stay in Idaho and put a facility here in Pocatello. And they did that. They chose the old Bridge restaurant building on Second Street. Is it First Street or Second? First Street. And well, the Bridge was happy to oblige, but they needed somewhere else to go. So the PDA was able to provide a small grant to do Bully Dog to help them with the move. And I'll report that Bully Dog hasn't requested the money from that grant yet. So it hasn't been paid yet. We are trying to find out if they really want it or not. If they don't, we want to use it somewhere else where it can be used. So we're in the process of that. We were also able to provide a small loan to the Bridge to help them with the move into the old Yellowstone Hotel, which has been very underutilized for a long time, and I think it's really kind of helped brighten that corner of Old Town. And we're hoping it'll encourage others to come in and do the same in the same area.
Did Bully Dog move into that facility?
They did. They're there. They're working there. The grant, the grant was contingent on certain levels of employment and salaries and things, which is pretty standard. But at this point, and we've contacted them a number of times, they haven't really requested or come back for the money. And if they don't, that's perfectly fine. We were able to help with this process of keeping them and everything else. And then if they don't need the money at this point or don't desire it, then we can put it back in our coffers and use it for other things. So. Another, I wouldn't call it a project, but another item, and I'll just mention it, is the PDA does own what we call on the board the positron facility, which is the accelerator above AMI. The way that we ended up with it is a little bit like, well, not a little bit like, but not terribly different from the Hoku facility. We actually, years ago, before I was on the board, the PDA provided some funding to a company called Positron to get in there and everything else. Well, they went bankrupt, and we, through foreclosure, reacquired this property, right? Because it had secured the money that we had loaned them. So that's how we have it. I just wanted to let you know we do own that, and we are leasing it to ISU right now. They have occasionally hinted they might be interested in purchasing it, but until all of the hubbub at the university settles, we probably won't be able to discuss that any further. We need a new president and get in there, and then we can discuss it again. But we're leasing it to ISU right now, and that relationship's been really good. The final project from 2017 that I want to mention, and this, I've left it for last because it's really the big one. And it's the Siphon Northgate interchange, interstate interchange. I'm sure the city council is quite aware of what's going on out there. And I just want to talk about the interchange itself, because this is, it requires considerable funding. The city has participated in that funding, the county has participated in that funding, and the PDA did participate in that funding as well, including some developers, private funders who intending to develop that area out there. So that funding came from our general account. We had the money to do it. We did not have to take out any loans or debt or any bonding to do that. So we were happy to help. Other years we may not have been in that position, but we were now, and so we were happy to help with that. And we are hopeful that all the plans out there actually happen. So I guess to sum it up, I just want to let you know that the PDA finances are very healthy. We have reserves in all of the accounts for all the districts and in our general fund. I think as what I've seen being on the board's really quite conservative with its financing and very careful. And our goal is to stay that way. But at the same time, we're happy to get involved in any development projects or urban renewal projects that anybody might have, any ideas. So City Council is always welcome to bring those to us. Anyone from the public, usually it's developers and business owners who might contact us. Lastly, I really want to thank the city staff that helps our board. We have board members from the community. The mayor sits on our board. We're going to have Councilman Johnston on our board. We have someone from the county, from ISU, and some others from the community. But we could not do what we're doing without the continued help of city staff. So we have Melanie here. She's city staff, and she's our executive director. We have Joyce, who's sort of hiding over on the side. And she is our treasurer. If you have any specific financial questions, I'm going to ask her to come to the table because she knows any of those answers. City Legal has helped us last year. We're quite thankful for them. So again, a big thanks to the city staff, to Mayor and the City Council for allowing them to help us with this, with our work. So with that, if there's any questions.
Questions, Council?
I have one question about the Siphon Road interchange.
Yeah.
Will you be setting up a TIF district for that?
Well,
For the infrastructure?
we're talking about goals for 2018 now.
Mm-hmm.
Very recently, the PDA did approve a resolution to submit a request for the TIF to the City Council. So ultimately, it's up to the City Council now whether that happens or not, and I believe it is set for an upcoming meeting. So I think by the resolution, it's the PDA's goal to do that. And we're just waiting for approval from City Council and for the legal process to move forward on that. We'll need direction from the City Council. So yeah.
It sounds like some of your TIFs have accomplished their goals. Is it time to close some?
That's a very good question, and it's something we talk about monthly almost at our meetings. With respect to the North Yellowstone area, that one cannot be closed until the debt's been satisfied, and that's going to take a few more years. But I'm happy to report that it looks like we're going to be able to pay that off early because the district's been so successful and close the district early. Some of the other districts, for example, North Portneuf, I'm going to speak for myself. I can't speak for the board, but I think there's a sense that we need to figure out what we're doing with that land before we close something like that. The Naval Ordnance District is one we talk about frequently, especially right now where it feels like our hands are a little bit tied to really help them at the moment because of this lawsuit. But Councilman, we are really, it's an issue we talk about all the time. We don't intend to keep anything open if we're really not doing anything else in the area, in the district itself. So yes. And I understand the financial implications. Let me just kind of express that. The board does. We understand that as long as the district remains open, the tax increment goes into our accounts to improve those districts instead of going into the city's general tax accounts. And so the sooner we can get these things closed, accomplishing the purposes of the district number one and then closing it and getting it back to the city, the better, and we fully appreciate that. So
has some of your discussion been with the open-endedness of the litigation that's going on with the Naval Ordnance Plant, that maybe it'd be better to step away and consider a new district there if things get decided?
We have discussed, the Naval Ordnance Plant has been discussed at our meetings. We don't have any role in the litigation. We're sort of on the sidelines, just kind of watching what's happening there. We're a little bit hesitant to rush to close the district or any of them, and I'm going to talk generally, not just about that, because if we do, it is true we can always reopen a district, but what it does is it changes the tax basis. And if there is no new increment when it's reopened, then there's nothing for us to really use to do anything. So we're kind of really careful about it, and we look at these carefully. All I can say is it is an issue that we discuss at almost every meeting. And our goal is not to keep these things open forever. It's to understand what the purpose for the district is, to try and accomplish it. And if we can, then close it. And if we're still working towards it, then maybe we keep it open. But that's kind of the response.
Any other questions? Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to agenda item 4, proposed amendments to Pocatello sign ordinance section 15.20 update. Planning staff will be present to discuss proposed changes to reader board section 15.20.160 and off-premise billboard sign section 15.20.240 of the Pocatello sign ordinance.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the, good morning, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Carl Anderson, Senior Planner with the City of Pocatello. Melanie Gigley, our Director, and Terry New, our Associate Planner. You have before you a draft of the proposed changes addressing the electronic message displays. At the City Council study session held on January 11th, 2018, staff presented information pertaining to electronic message displays that had been collected from several other communities. At the same meeting, staff was directed to consider revisions to the sign code intended to accomplish the following. Consider measurements to in foot candles, illuminants rather than nits, or illuminants. Require automatic dimmers on all new electronic message displays. Standardized requirements for all new electronic message displays. So that's reader boards and on-premise, off-premise electronic messages. Consider a curfew for electronic message displays. Add a standard that addresses owner acknowledgement of sign regulations to assist in code enforcement. The report that you have in front of you contains the proposed changes that are intended to address these goals that we had identified. Additionally, the council may wish to consider the following modifications to the current draft. 1520.250.e, modify the language requiring 1 EMD per business or business center to 1 EMD per business unless located in a business center, then 1 EMD per business center, EMD being an electronic message display. And then upon legal review, remove the curfew requirements for the sign for signs not located in either a residential or residential commercial professional zone. And then finally, as discussed at a recently held working lunch, you have before you the potential noticing requirement for 3 separate locations when measuring the noticing requirement at 200, 500, and 1,000 feet. That concludes just kind of a brief summary of what you have before you for discussion, and with that, we'll answer questions.
Council?
I'm not sure I'm smart enough to ask.
I don't know that I am either, but I will. But I do want to say this, though, and I do want to make sure this is on the record, that we appreciate the sign companies that have these electronic billboards have turned them down and done what they told us they would do in good faith. And I wanted them to know how much we appreciate that, because you do not have that light bleeding off of those signs anymore like they were. And so I think that was part of the issue why we are where we are today, and the sign companies have taken it upon themselves to fix it, knowing the direction that the council was going in. So I want them to know we appreciate what you've done in doing so. So thank you very much with that. And I was hoping that would give somebody something to think about to ask the question.
I have one.
Yes.
On 5G, on the electronic message displays, it's about the curfew. So it says all electronic message displays located in a residential or residential commercial professional zone shall not be illuminated between 9:30 and 6 p.m. and 6:30 a.m. And then the curfew for the ones that are in the other zones. But my question was about signs that might be right on the border. They're not in the residential zone, but they could be impacted. I mean, people living in that zone could be impacted by the sign. And I think changing the brightness has had a big effect. I mean, I've seen that in signs around town that I've looked at. It does make a difference. But if your house is located in such a way that you can see that sign when it's on, and it might affect you. Could we put anything in there about places where it's adjacent to or directly adjacent to a residential area? I mean, should there be anything in there about that?
Sure, that's absolutely something that the council may consider. Is if, for instance, one example might be if property is adjacent to a commercial general zone and that adjacent property has an electronic message display, then maybe one solution might be the curfew be extended, or staff might consider alternate mitigations to that.
Because I think the curfew times themselves are fine. It's just sort of hard and fast as far as if you're in the zone or if you're not in the zone, whether there would be a curfew or not. So the sign might be right next to the line and doesn't have to meet that curfew, but yet it may impact people who are on the other side of that line. So I was just concerned about those situations.
Are there any signs that would be affected by that, Linda?
I don't know specifically. I was trying to think of some, but I'm not sure.
Possibly down Yellowstone, where you have a block off of Yellowstone on either side. You've got residential districts, not the entire length of Yellowstone, but interspersed, and so it might affect those.
So with the signs being turned down and being at the proper lighting for the sign, is that bleeding into and off of those signs? Is it bleeding into anywhere outside of the sign itself? I ask because I've driven up and down Yellowstone looking to see if we have this problem anymore, and I have not seen it. I see the light. I don't see the light bleeding off of. I see more light on the static signs, quite frankly. I mean, we've got lights that are hitting the wall and bouncing back up and off, and that's where I see more light pollution than the actual electronic signs. And so, is it an issue?
To be honest, I don't think so. Like you said, a lot of the static ones are the issue. Many of, the billboards.
I wouldn't say that the static signs are the issue. I'm not going to suggest we go and go after static signs now, because that's a whole other can of worms that we've made a commitment that, static signs are static signs, and electronic billboards are what we're looking at right now. And that, I don't want to even get into the middle of the other stuff. My question is very simply, do we have light bleeding off of those signs into neighborhoods and into other adjoining properties?
I don't believe so, because going down Yellowstone, I believe there are only 5 electronic billboards down Yellowstone. And 2 or 3 of them aren't even adjacent to a residential area. And most of them have the automatic dimmer. And I know the ones that don't, I've talked to Greg Suttner, and he's just waiting for the ground to dry out a little bit so that he can get a boom truck up there to install dimmers. And so they will all have those dimmers on them eventually, probably within 6 months would be my guess. He was very adamant that he is going to be fixing that. And so I don't know that they're a real issue now. The sign contractors have been very diligent in making sure that those signs aren't causing a problem.
One thing we might want to, we could consider, and to address that potential concern, is that if it's a sign that faces the direction of that different zoning district, to use it there. But the ones that are facing Yellowstone themselves are probably not.
And that's more what I was talking
Yeah.
about. I'm not suggesting that light is bleeding into someone's
But if it's
residential
directed-
space. I'm just saying, and I'm thinking really not of specific instances now. I'm just thinking we're writing code. It should,
Maybe we should think about it.
anything that could happen.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about the curfew here. If you have a situation now or that comes up in the future where you have a house that
Directly
faces a sign,
Yeah.
and they're looking right out their bedroom window into that sign,
I
it's
think-
not about that light bleeding into their building, but they can see it. So that's all I'm talking
So
about is,
that's a
could you
possibility.
make sure that the language in the curfew part of this, that section covers a situation like that, is all I was thinking about.
Councilwoman Adamson.
Yeah, along the lines of what the mayor was mentioning, I can definitely tell a difference on some of the signs around town that they have gone down, and I appreciate that greatly. I do think that maybe not on Yellowstone, but there probably are some signs that are still bothersome to people in town, I believe. We still have been getting some emails from people who are concerned about it. And so one of the things that I'm very interested in doing was someone brought up the possibility of maybe a field trip of sorts where we could go and actually see, okay, that one seems like it's pretty bright, and we can see, is it above what our code proposed would be or not? Because I still feel like there might be some, and I want to know, are those going to come down when we adopt this, or is that still going to be an issue? Because I don't want to think we're covering it, but still have problems later. So,
And I think we have a sign contractor who is willing to help out with that. We have to structure it correctly to meet the council's schedule and open meeting requirements.
And then his schedule
And
as
his
well.
schedule, and staff, But it is something I think we could put together if that's your desire.
If we could get a sense of what that point
What it looks
3
like.
looks like,
Yes.
so that we
That would be
know.
very helpful.
Because we've seen a difference, but just that we have something to measure against. What exactly does point 3
Doesn't
mean?
make
What does it
any
look like?
and there are still some on-premise signs that are quite
Right.
bright in town, and so I'm curious to know when we
What
test
those look
those,
like.
are those above, and what are we looking at like moving forward if we're going to have?
One of the other things that I think we would want to do with any change that you adopt is do some education for, maybe through the chamber, through the sign contractors, saying, we want you to be aware of this, and here's how we can all work together to keep you able to use your sign the way you want to without impacting, especially residential areas.
When I read through the proposed ordinance, one of the things I saw was a proposal for a contract to be signed between you guys and the owner of the sign. How do you propose to pass that on to a future owner?
It will be part of the sign permit package. This was brought to my attention, that Idaho Falls actually does this, is when they apply for an electronic message center sign, they get the signature of who will be the end user of the sign, and it basically lines out all of their requirements of how bright it can be, when it needs to be turned off, things like this. And they found that it's very beneficial, because then that end user has signed that form, and then you're able to go back to them rather than going to the sign contractor to then go back to, and it just kind of cuts out the middleman a little bit and opens up a dialogue with that business owner.
I understand that, Terry, but I go in and buy that business. How are you going to obligate me in that contract?
I don't know that we're writing it as a contract maybe, so the obligation would follow. It would still simply be a code that they are required to meet. Maybe
It's more of an acknowledgement.
it's more of an
the code.
acknowledgement that you understand the code.
Right?
So
That's great for the first owner,
Yeah,
but how does that pass down the line?
that's continual education. And hopefully-
Re-sign with a new owner?
Well, boy, that.
Well, it looks like it could be included as part of the, what do we call it, title of that goes with the business. I mean, usually there's a restriction that goes, if you have a contract that has a usage, it usually goes with it. If I sell a farm and I've got water rights, I have to get it processed as part of that title. And if we change leases out at the airport, we don't expect them to just come in and say, oh, we want to rework everything out here. It just carries over. So I think there's a way to do it. We'd have to get legal on it.
Yeah, to obligate the business owner, Carl's saying we would probably want to work on some language that is, because I think we were intending this more to be informational at the front. We did not really think about later on, because that's true of so many things. And can be a continual problem, to be honest. They say, well, I bought the business. Why can't I just do the business?
Or say, nobody told me.
Exactly.
What is the Idaho? If Idaho Falls has it in the ordinance, what does it do? Why are we trying to reinvent the wheel?
They don't have, I don't believe it's in their ordinance. I think it's just a piece of paper attached to their sign permit.
It's not part of their ordinance. It's not.
No. It's just they acknowledge at the time of the sign permit, it has to come in when the contractor brings in the sign permit. They have to have the owner's acknowledgement. It would leave, that gives us some room, and we could write it for potential, I'm signing this for now, because the sign runs with the building. If the sign runs with the building, I guess they probably usually do.
So business licenses, they must have them in Idaho Falls, and maybe that's the way to do it here, is we have a business license.
I was actually going to say that would be one of the things, if we were to have a business license that would come with a business license, they would have, we would say right on there, you're bound by the sign code, and here's,
But I don't want to run down that rabbit hole, because that's a whole other issue. But that's probably how Idaho Falls addresses it, if they do.
We have Ken Marbo here, whose office is in Idaho Falls. Could we ask him to speak to how it's handled there?
Yeah, if you would like to speak to how it's handled.
I'd like to speak on a couple issues, if I may.
We only want to hear about how it's handled there. We don't want all the other issues.
If you want to know about the aluminum, how the digitals work, I can cover that again. We did it in the hearing a couple months ago.
So, Ken, why don't you jump up a seat, pull it up to the table, and then tell the audience who you are.
I'm Kent Marbo. I'm with Lamar Advertising. My office here is at 420 Yellowstone, and I also have an office in Idaho Falls. So regarding this, the way that Idaho Falls has been doing it with the contractor is basically not with us. They haven't done it with Lamar or if any other billboard company has a digital. They will have the contractor sign off with the landowner, knowing that they have to keep it under the terms of the conditions of illumination, all that. So, and then I'm not sure, but I think what happens is then if it were to be sold, I think it still is pending with that new landowner that they keep the sign under the regulations that the city asks them to keep it. Something like it's not in the ordinance. So that's basically on premise. It hasn't come up to us on off premise, but then again, the last time we built a digital up there a couple years ago, it was never brought up or made us sign it. And if I may, on the illumination, which you bring up a great point, the signs that we have on Yellowstone illuminate outside. They don't go, or right out front. They don't go outside the perimeter of the actual face. So lights really don't show up to residential areas to the side. They stay right out front to the streets that they're on. Granted, if you have it on the border and it's going right into a house, I haven't seen that on any of our off-premise digitals, so I think we're fine there. You might have some on-premise. On static illumination, those signs of ours are basically right on the sign. You might have a piece of art that's shiny, it could, but it does not pollute. And the other thing is, remember, we turn off every off-premise static billboard between 11 and 12 at night. So they don't go any later than that. So I hope that helps you with your lighting issue. If there are any other questions, I can answer.
So you have found that you don't need to have them illuminated a certain period in the night?
On the static, digital have to run 24/7. Another point that we know nationally, that is if digital billboards are turned off at any time during the night, we found that we have more chance for vandalism. When they're on, people don't mess with them when they're off, and it's same true with on-premise. So if you have a business that turns it off at a certain time, they're prone to be broken more, vandalized more than they are when they're on. And we have sent some information to city on that, so.
It's surprising that people would do that under the cover of darkness rather
Well, they're
than
not getting seen.
wait till it's all lit up.
When it's off, it's dark.
It's just shocking to me.
Hopefully they don't. But those are just little points, and then, I think you bring up good points on illumination, but our sign's already on dimmers, and I know the other companies have, like Terry said, are going to put them on, and that'll make a whole bit of difference.
So one of the premises that I hear you saying is that in order for the sign only to be illuminating on the roadway, so to speak, that it's a 90-degree angle to the roadway, because any canting of that sign would make it go across the roadway.
Not on digital.
It doesn't cant, you don't cant a sign?
Well, I'm not the person who built it. I just been told that the illumination comes straight off.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you're at 90 degree, you're shining right down the road. But if you're at a 45 degree, you're going to be shining across the road.
No. No.
Shines down the roadway.
Well, what he's saying
Here's the roadway.
Okay.
They are
Here's the
turned at an
sign. If
angle.
it's at a
Yes.
90 degree, you see just from the road. But if it's canted at a 45,
Well, I
you're going
understand.
across the roadway.
You mean like if it's V'd?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we don't have any digitals that are V'd, but if it is, then it might, it would illume out from the V directly, so I don't think we have any of that right now in the city
Okay.
that go into any residential. I know that you guys have a V, but it goes right into commercial, it doesn't even touch residential. So, but that's a good question, yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ken.
Okay, you bet, thank
Whoa,
you.
whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well,
Just a
no,
minute.
not for, no, it was
Oh, you're
for-
good.
Yeah.
Coming down here.
So as
could
part
see
of
this
the
sign.
consolidation into just one section concerning electronic, I think we may have gotten rid of a term about something about electronic animation, maybe was in one of the sections, but that was coming out. I'm just looking through, maybe I read through it all and then
Certainly
read
not
through it
here.
again, and I'm trying to remember where I read it, but I'm just under
If we
the
missed it, it needs to be in there.
15.20.250.
No
It has no
chasing.
chasing, blinking, rotating, flashing,
Shall be
and then no
employed in
streaming
displaying-
video. But I didn't see the animation unless it's somewhere later.
Okay.
Anyway, I would just want to make sure that we
With the same intent.
didn't open it up to more.
We will make sure that, the intent was to reword it so that it all said the same for both. We will take a look at that and make sure that we didn't inadvertently reword it to an extent that we pulled something out that we didn't intend to.
Because I think some of those animations could be just as
Or streaming video. would be
distracting
just
as a video
distracting,
potentially.
yes.
Yeah.
We also have had some talk about grandfathering on the illumination going from flip candles where a sign was installed under NITS and that standard versus foot candles and a new standard. We may have situations where, yes, some grandfathering may occur. The problem with that is still going to be the enforcement of the NITS, where you have to be up on basically on a boom truck measuring. If it's a large sign, measuring it and then having it adjusted and then come back down because you have to measure on the plane of the sign, I believe. I'm not a sign person.
Why would we need to grandfather?
And that's part of the question, and we kind of came to that question a little bit late. I don't know that we do have to grandfather, but we do want to make sure we address that question. That if someone was relying on NITS and we change it to foot candles, are we taking someone's right to do their work? We just want to make sure.
Nobody's relying on NITS. Nobody's measured them.
I don't believe so, but we will make sure that that's clarified before you would actually vote on an ordinance.
Is there some way to require reader boards to meet the same standard as a billboard, electronic billboard?
That's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's make
I
them-
see more problem with the reader boards
Yeah.
around town by
Right now,
far
that's- yeah.
than I do the
Right.
digital billboards.
And that's what this would do.
Yeah.
Part of this was to combine the sections for EMD where applicable and for off-premise, and also with some of the research that we've done, and try to address all electronic message displays. One thing this does is to create a definition for an electronic message display, which would encompass both.
One of the fairly minor things that may have to remain is on very small panels. We are told that scrolling, some amount of scrolling may be necessary because you can't get the message in this size. So we may need to, and we're still talking about some allowance for that.
I think
As long as it scrolls in a
And you had it in here.
and we have it in
where if
here,
it's
and we
a
want to
long
make sure that
message.
works. Yeah.
That seems
And there is no time frame on that though right now. So one question I had was, that it's not a big sentence that's scrolling for, 30 seconds that people are trying to read, that maybe
Right.
it gets done within a certain amount of time. Whether we should put that in or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's maybe not an issue, but it could become one. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we can certainly look to see if there are other best practices for a time frame that would establish something like that.
Maybe even stay with the 1 to 2 second transition, that you still have to scroll the whole thing within 2 seconds so that you,
Just so it's not going on
Yeah. so that you're not driving down the road trying to,
Right.
Trying to read.
trying to read the whole menu.
So you
For
would
instance.
have like a maximum length a message could be before it started a new message. But I mean, you'd allow some scrolling, but it couldn't just go on.
But that's just for like the little.
It's really only when it's the small that a whole message won't fit on. And we're trying very hard to keep this uniform, but there are some limitations that we don't want to take all utility away either.
Right.
So we're trying to create something, and maybe it has to do with the transition time. Quite frankly, I would imagine a business owner is not going to create too long a message because they know you're gone before you see it. So it's certainly not to their benefit to do so either.
I was thinking that might be more the case with schools. Reader boards at schools where they're talking about some event or something. And in that situation, you're not driving by trying to read it.
You're there.
You're there.
And a couple seconds is plenty.
Yeah, I don't think this would be a big issue with businesses.
No.
They're going to keep their message short.
Because they,
We haven't discussed the notification distance.
really right in front of you, I was told them I was going to shut up. I haven't done a very good job of it.
Sure. So what this looks at is 3 different existing off-premise sign locations and the noticing requirements that were required.
That are, the 200 foot is what's required now.
Okay. And then a potential for 500-foot radius and then a 1,000-foot radius. And this is to provide kind of a visual representation of what that noticing, what properties that those radiuses might cover.
This is to notice people from where the sign will be located.
Yes, yes.
And one point Melanie just mentioned is the 780 South Valley Road. The sign on this example actually did not require noticing.
Because of its zoning. It's just a representation of what it would look like. But you can see, I think, I can't show you, it's hopeless. You can see that 200 feet is really fairly small. And this is not something where it is our code, not Idaho code. So, and even if it were Idaho code, we can be more restricted, just simply not less restricted.
Who sends these notices out, the business or the state, or the city?
We do. They
Does
provide
it-
the mailing labels.
They provide the mailing and stuff like that for it, and then we send it.
Yeah.
So if you extend it, how much more does it cost the business to?
It'll be $3 per address.
I'm in favor of the 500. I think that we've been hearing more and more that people aren't getting noticed, and that our code really is set up in several places that people can be a part of the dialogue, and without notice, they can't be a part of it. I think the 1,000 feet is it's just too far reaching. But when I look here, we're several of these illustrations, one of them there's no impact, and a couple of them it's minor impact. It has, like 10 or 15 more residences it would be. So I'm in favor of the 500.
I just sat and counted on this first one, on the 249 Yellowstone. There were 12 addresses on the 200 feet, and there are 34 additional addresses on the 500 feet. So it could cost over $100 extra.
But I think when you're trying to be a good neighbor, that's money well spent.
I just wonder why it's there. If the signs have been turned down, they're not intrusive, they're not bleeding into the neighborhoods. Why are we charging more for a company to tell more people that they're going to put a sign that really isn't going to be intrusive to them and really,
So how much is the sign cost that goes up? How much would a big,
The structure?
yeah,
Oh, ours go anywhere from static poster back-to-back now over 50,000 up to digital now. It's the face alone anywhere from 80 to 100 or more.
okay, so $100.
And granted, this is a rule that isn't just for digital, it's for static as well.
It would be proposed.
this would be for any small business that's putting, mom and pop shop that's putting a sign.
This would be only
Only off-premise.
Yeah.
On premise, unless it's an exception, it just goes in. It does not have any notification.
Commercial general is the only one that requires notification. Light industrial and industrial do not.
Right now.
Now say that again.
Commercial general is the only one that requires noticing of neighbors. Light industrial and industrial do not. They're not allowed in residential, commercial, professional, or residential.
So like the sign we approved on Irving Middle School that wasn't going to affect anybody, that if you drive by there, you can see it from the moon. We wouldn't have to tell anybody that it was going up there. But if they were to put a billboard that isn't going to affect the moon, then we'd have to tell everybody within within a 500-foot radius. Seems like the on-premise signs seem to be more of the issue now than the off-premise signs, but that's when we're talking about lighting them up and stuff. So I'm not suggesting we go and start charging more for that. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, we have had a lot of people that have been very concerned that they didn't, we had just last Thursday people saying we didn't notice far enough, for a particular issue. So, given the school situation, are you suggesting we should have some kind of a notification requirement for that as well?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm not suggesting that we should add any requirements to that. But I think the requirements of dimming them down and stuff should be there. I don't see where I am not seeing the problem with these billboards lighting up the world and having to notice everybody out there. It's an extra $100. You can say, what's $100? Well, to some people, $100 is a lot of money. To some people, it isn't much. And so, just for notification to get people notified, at what point do you draw the line? The people last time that were complaining about not being notified were well outside of the 1,000-foot radius anyway. We're going to go to 2 miles if we get somebody outside of that.
I think you're taking it too far, Mayor. I think 500 feet, 200 feet, a kid can throw a rock over 200 feet.
No, it can't.
Yeah, they can.
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's true.
I threw a softball 280 some feet.
Well,
a kid could throw a rock a long way.
I guess at what point?
It's not a big issue to get people in your neighborhood when you're trying to be a good neighbor within 500 feet. There's not a lot of application this hits, but it just makes good neighbor. It lets people have the dialogue. Lets them to be engaged in government. Protect their own property.
Today, this isn't far enough. Tomorrow, 500 feet's not going to be far enough. Next year, 1,000 feet won't be far enough.
Well, let's just try it 500 feet and see. If it satisfies the people who want to be engaged in saying, I've invested in my life savings in my house and it's my sanctuary, and I want to be able to protect that sanctuary and at least have a say-so on what comes around it.
Couple thoughts from staff, maybe?
Excuse me. So maybe one possible option might be to consider noticing for all land use, because it kind of sounds like I think what we're hearing a little bit is that maybe this is something that applies to other applications as well. So perhaps separately from the electronic message displays, staff can look at noticing requirements overall and consider all land use as one option. It's just one thought, unless you have any.
Or if we, because I think that's a broader discussion you may or may not want to have after the concerns that were addressed before, where we meet state code as far as noticing, but is that enough? And we can, that's something you can talk about if you want. The other option would be to treat this like all of our other, except variance land uses, which require 300 feet. That's a state code requirement for a CUP, for an annexation, for a rezone. It's a standard that I think is somewhat more, maybe very much more defensible to say, this is what we call out as affecting other land use noticing.
I think it's a good compromise.
That was 300?
And that's at 300 of the outside perimeter.
And that's kind of the
property.
standard for other types of
And that's the
noticing.
standard for everything but strictly a variance. And that's based on Idaho code.
One comment I just wanted to make is I'm just looking at this last page that you gave us, and we know there were people that were within that 1,000-foot radius that said we should have been notified. So I'm trying to put myself in the homeowner's shoes saying it needs to go all the way to 1,000, and then I'm trying to put myself in the sign, installer or the business owner's shoes and say, yeah, but that's really a lot of noticing to have to do. And I'm hoping we can find a way to kind of meet in the middle. It seems like 200 is not enough, but it seems like 1,000 is going to be a problem. So I do support bumping it up a little bit, whether that's 500 or 300. I think that's a good compromise. We can try it. As we've said before, we're doing some things, and we're going to be looking at the sign code a lot moving into the future, and we can always readjust next go round when we do some additional updates. So to me, that makes sense to try and come a little ways and have some kind of a compromise on that.
I really like the consistency of the state law of 300 feet. We change these things to 5,000. It's a little confusing to people, but if we're consistent, I think we'd be well advised.
It's also much easier for staff to administer. If we have some of our standards that are consistent, and granted, we deal in consistencies, but some of these are easier to explain. And yes, it gives us some grounding in other than just, well, we think. This is something that has happened over and over in every community in the state. So maybe that's a reasonable thing. Going forward, we are prepared to bring this to you as early as March 1st by hearing. If you are ready, we have kept the entire list of people who have either submitted testimony or been noticed on previous requirements. They've been told each time we have come to a study session, even though these are not public comment, we do get some comments, and we try to make sure you are aware of what we're hearing, even though we can't technically submit them for the record. So at your direction, we can go as early as March 1st. And I don't know who's going yes or no behind us.
Let's get it done.
I would like to get it done, but I would still like to have the opportunity before we have that
Yes.
decision to go do our field trip,
Okay,
just so that we can see, oh yes, that one's bright, but it would, under
So
the
you want the field
ordinance,
trip
be.
first?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we do have to give a notice because we'll have a quorum for that,
Yes.
so hopefully that won't
So we'll
delay
probably,
anything.
yeah, probably
We
we'll,
can prepare it for March 1st and within the next 3 weeks, try to figure out how to get everybody together.
we can do that because technically we need to send that notice to the Journal in 36 minutes. No, 31, in order to have it on the March 1st notification. So,
Maybe that's too fast then.
but Carl,
Okay, then go to March 15 and
okay,
March 15, and that gives us plenty of time and more than 31 minutes to notice the journal.
We have it drafted.
And if I may, I think staff would like a little bit of direction just on the two items of the additional changes not contained in the current proposal, which was the language to modify EMD per business or business center. Currently, staff's proposing something along the lines of 1 EMD per business unless located within a business center, then 1 EMD per business center, rather than what the report contains, would be one change that we would propose to make there. The reason for that would be what happens if you have multiple businesses in a business center. Does each get an electronic message display? Additionally, consider removing the curfew requirement for commercial, general, and industrial, and maintaining that to residential and RCP. Those are just kind of...
Although
No, go ahead. That seems to make sense to me because otherwise you get into an issue potentially. We don't have our city attorney here to tell us, but where you're making somebody turn off one and somebody else not.
Yeah.
So to me, that seems to make sense.
Would there be any consideration with, if you have one per center, about the size of the center? Is one in, I mean, if it's a larger business complex,
Sure.
would there be cases where one wouldn't be enough for all the businesses?
one of the things that this just is popping in my brain. You know the Maple Street Plaza at the corner of Maple and Yellowstone has a nice sign up front that has an electronic message display, but each individual does not. So the difference would be each individual business could or could not. One of the ways you could also regulate that is if a business is entitled already to more than one ground sign or more than one directory sign. And I can't tell you whether, off the top of my head, Terry might be able to say this, whether that particular plaza would be allowed one on Yellowstone and on Maple.
If they have 2 street frontages, they're allowed 2 pole signs. And so at that point, they could have
So
2 electronic message displays. One thing that I've learned just in talking with sign contractors when they're issuing these permits, and also before they do, when they're still in the selling phase, a lot of times the property owner is selling the advertising to the tenants in the business center. And so they're not all going to want to advertise on it because they can't afford it or they don't have a sale going at that time or whatever. Because many times the businesses are using those in the business centers for sale items. And so that kind of helps regulate it themselves.
So they don't all want to be on it all the time?
Right.
Okay.
And we could look further into that.
Yeah.
And talk with the contractors that we work with.
Okay? All right.
Okay. Well,
Thank you.
we will aim for a field trip. We'll work with Connie and Ruth and get that set up, and then a March 15th ordinance, pending what we see out there on the ground. Okay.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to agenda item number 5, Water Smart software presentation. Representatives from Water Smart Software will give a presentation on customer service software that will allow utility customers to better understand and manage their water use, receive timely alerts and notifications, and make bill pay easier.
What else do we need? Good morning, Mayor and Council. Cindy Robbins, Utility Billing Director. Justin Armstrong, Water Superintendent. Previously, we have been asked by some council members where the future in technology is going for the utilities. So we are being joined with Steve Hansen, Hydro Specialties, and then Dominique Gomez with Water Smart, and they're going to show you that. First, I'm going to show you my second slide of 2. Okay. Before I turn it over to them. Oops. Needed to wait till it comes in.
No, it just takes a minute.
I'll get your eyesight. I could turn this around. All right. First, I was going to talk. One of the challenges that Justin and I experience is that when customers say they didn't use that much water, and so we take those very serious, obviously. And so what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to go out. We're going to look if it's a manual read meter that our read is accurate. We're going to check to see if there's any movement on those meters that might indicate a leak. We're going to ask the property owner to check inside all their toilets, water softeners and things to see if there's any leaks going on there that might be causing that higher consumption. Listening as well. Water shop department, they'll be going out to try to assist to see if there's any underground leaks, sprinkler systems and such. Ultimately, water shop may test that meter to make sure that it is registering accurately, complies with the American Water Works Association. Bottom line, though, ultimately the water has to go through that meter to be recorded, so sometimes we don't have all of the answers for that. So, true story, there was a couple that was going through exactly what I just talked about. They had been going through everything, they had high consumption, couldn't understand why. The guy actually stayed home from work one day sick, heard some water running, so he went to look at what was going on. And this is what he found. It appears that his cat had found a way to entertain itself during the day by flushing the toilet and watching the water go around. And so, here he goes. He knows how to do that well, and he has a good time. So,
Looks like a lot of fun there.
we don't have all the answers, and it's hard for them as well. But I'll tell you, this little demo here is only 2 minutes and 48 seconds, and that little guy flushed that thing almost 10 times. So all day long while he was entertaining himself, we can see why those people's consumption was just a little out of the ordinary. All right, with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over now to...
I just want to point out that was a cat, not a dog, by the way.
Exactly.
Okay, while we're on that subject, I was speaking to some Cub Scouts not long ago, and one of them asked me how much it costs per flush. Justin, can you give me an answer to that? A typical one, not a high efficiency or anything.
A typical?
Yeah, typical.
Yeah. Typical, you're probably about 3 to 5 gallons per flush.
So that would translate to how many cents?
Well, we're charging you $2.48 per thousand as soon as they get to that 1,000 mark, and right?
Yeah, it's pretty small at that point, but
Do
if
you
you
like to
had
drive this
continual
yourself,
use,
or do you want me to?
it could
I need
definitely
to have
add
yours.
up. Leaky toilets or other things on the
Yeah, I
part.
can trade you
Big
places.
consumers.
It's 5 gallons, Jim, it'd be just over a penny.
Just over a penny. Okay, that's good enough. Next time I'll be prepared. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Dominic, and she's going to show you what is available with the technology that we're pretty excited about as well.
So my name is Dominique Gomez. I'm from a company called WaterSmart. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that we do and share just a very quick demo of the kind of software that we'll be providing, the information we'll be providing to the citizens of Pocatello. So, you know, the thing that most utilities are facing right now is that their customers have these really high expectations for them. They have the same expectations for their local utility as they have for their other service providers, whether it's their cell phone company or their credit card company, you know, these big multinational companies. So they expect information to be available online, instantly, and to be able to kind of do everything without ever having to talk to a real human being. And so that's often, you know, difficult, and utilities are trying to make sure that they're able to meet that expectation while keeping up all the hard work they do every day to provide clean, reliable drinking water 24/7, which by itself is a job. And so what WaterSmart does is really try to offer the software and the tools to help the utilities to meet those customer expectations and to provide better service for their customers. So a little bit about how we work. So what WaterSmart does is we work with utilities where they're at. And so what that means is that we don't require any changes in the infrastructure in terms of how often a utility is reading their meters, or what meter reading technology they're using, or what they're using for billing and payments. We kind of come in and we work with them where they already are. So we ingest the meter data as it comes in, and in most utilities, like in Pocatello, that's coming in either bi-monthly or monthly. So 1 or 2 reads, in a two-month period. So that's not a lot of data, but it actually tells you quite a bit about each customer. So we take that information in, and we also take in information from the billing system. So we do know what the bill payment cycle was, how much a customer actually owed, and whether or not they paid on time. And then we also bring in a lot of third-party data. So we bring in weather and climate information that obviously drives a lot of water use, especially here in the West. And we also bring in census and real estate information. So, you can tell a little bit about how big an irrigation area someone might have, and whether or not they have updated fixtures based on the age of their home. And that's, again, just really understanding each customer and doing a customer profile, and that's going to provide better information to the end customer to help them understand their water use. And the real idea here is to provide a better customer experience and to try and reduce a lot of those phone calls that Cindy was talking about. Across the board, across the US, the #1 phone call into a water utility is a high bill complaint. Not a lot of people call to say, oh, my bill seems really low this month, but people do complain a lot about high bills, and often there's this belief that they're not correct. And water utility departments often spend a lot of time trying to provide good service and doing all of these steps that Cindy talked about to show that it is correct, when usually it's just that the customer is using that much water and they can't believe it. Usually there's nothing wrong with the meter or the meter read or the billing system. It's just that really they did use that much water. So we really try and take all this information in to get ahead of that cycle, keep the customer happier, and reduce the burden on the end utility. A little bit about the customer experience, and what I'm going to spend the most time today is just clicking really quickly through kind of the customer tools that they're going to use. So we do have a customer portal that I'll show you, and one of the big things there is that most people have busy lives, and when they come home at the end of the day, they want to turn on the television or watch Netflix or something. They don't necessarily want to spend too much time in the customer portal thinking about their water use. So what we really focus on is making sure that this is a useful tool that's going to send information out to them when it's important. So just like I don't look at my credit card statement or my credit card account every day, but I get alerts. If there's some sort of strange charge on it, if my bill is overdue, that alert comes to me via text or email, and I know when to act. Same thing with cell phone. I don't look at my usage all the time, but if my husband's streaming the game, it sends me a text, and I know, we got to watch our data this month. And so that's what we want to do. We want to make sure we send information to the end customer when something's unusual, if their bill is a little bit higher than it typically is, or if they might have a leak. And so, that's the information that they really want coming to them. We also can send out information via both paper, email, and text message. We often find most utilities, when we start working with them, they don't have a way to contact their customers digitally, and they don't necessarily have email addresses and phone numbers to start with, and that's fine. One of the things that we will do is help them collect those over time. And that's going to provide a lot of benefits for the utility, not only to communicate about our tools and our program, but also about anything else that's happening, whether it's rate changes or some planned service outages because of maintenance and other things like that. So I'll show you a little bit about that. The last thing that we really do is try and take a lot of the work from the water utility billing department to help customers understand and actually fix some of the common problems themselves. So for instance, a leak. If you do have a leak, what might it be? We can kind of lead a customer through a self-resolution process to actually find that on their own. One of the things that we think is really important is to have an omni-channel presence. So we do often send a lot of print in the beginning, if that's the way to communicate with customers, because that's all you know is what their address is. You can send them a mailer, but we also do a lot of text and alerts, and then certainly have an online customer portal for those who want to come visit that.
What are the percentages? What do those mean?
Sure. So this is how many of the customers in the first year of a program typically receive or interact with the program in one of these ways. So you'll see in the first year of the program, about 70% usually interact in some way with the program. About 50% of those in that first year, it might be just because we're sending them a print mailing. But then some are going to be signing up for alerts. About 20% will get emails and sign up for emails, and about 20% will log into the customer portal.
So who's the lost 27%?
The last 27% is people who the utility hasn't decided to send a print mailing to, and they are not available digitally at that point. So some of the utilities that we work with do send it to everyone, and so in that case, in the first year at least, you're getting 100% engagement. But this is sort of typical across all of our utilities.
Why would you not be sending at least
to everyone?
Yeah.
We do work with a lot of utilities that are focused on high water users. So in the cities that we work with the size of Pocatello, it's much more likely to send it to everyone, but we do work with some really large cities as well, and for various reasons they want to just target certain users.
So this doesn't address the bill?
The bill?
Yeah.
So this is not a bill. So this is separate from the bill. So we interact with the billing information, but we don't take over that part of the department at all. It's a great question. A little bit about the utility experience. I'll spend just a little bit of time on this today, but the idea is to try to give the utilities some tools that they can use to be able to better understand the data that's at their fingertips, and hopefully be able to communicate in a little bit of a faster way, especially as they do over time build up email addresses and phone numbers. And that's one of the big things that we're trying to push. In using those print communications in the beginning, the idea is to slowly push those people over to providing email and cell phone numbers, and that's just going to be a big benefit for everyone in the city.
Just to let you know, out of our 18,000 accounts, we don't even have 2,000 people with email addresses with us.
And that's typical. Yeah. All right. So with that, I'm going to just change gears a little bit and give a very short demo of some of the products. So this is.
Can I ask you a quick question
Yes,
before you do
please.
the demo? So those were your year one statistics.
Yes.
How long have you guys have you had this software available? Like,
Sure.
what are the statistics moving on? Does it increase over time, or how does that look?
Yes, so it does increase over time. So we've been in business since 2011. That's when 2011. That's when we first started with our first customer, and it does increase over time, and it really moves to more digital interactions. So we've been working, for instance, with Park City since 2014. And they are pretty amazing in that they now have email addresses for email or a cell phone number for over 70% of their community, and a huge percentage of their community signed up for alerts. They've also done some best practices, which we would certainly share with Pocatello. Things like if you want a bill adjustment, if you say, oh, I had a leak or something went wrong and this bill isn't normal, and I want you to reduce the amount. In order to do that, you have to show you signed up for these sorts of alerts. So those sorts of things, and that really pushes people to the digital. So certainly over time, it's less paper and a lot more alerts and digital interaction. And we'd be happy to share more of those results if that'd be helpful.
Okay.
What I want to show is just a little bit of kind of the available information to the end customer. So I'm logged in right now to a sample customer portal. Everything is always branded for the city, so it'd be the City of Pocatello's logo up there in the upper left. And this is what someone would log in and see if they were a residential user, kind of an example customer portal. One thing that I will say is that we do know that a lot of people, about half people, use this on their mobile phone. So it is something that they can view on their mobile phone. You'll see it just looks a little bit different. It's got the kind of the hamburger menu up there on the left. So if they're on their home computer or on their mobile phone, they're able to access it. So one of the big things that we want to help Pocatello do is to push people over to e-billing and paying their bills online. We know that that's a goal over time. And we do work with a lot of the leading payment vendors to be able to link very seamlessly with those payment websites. So as Pocatello considers different options there, and I believe that's something coming up in the next in the coming months that you'll probably hear more about. We do work with a lot of those vendors. So for instance, if you do want someone to be able to view and pay their bill here, we can both allow them to view the bill online and pay the bill without ever having to leave the website, while it's actually using the back-end technology of some of those payment vendors. So that's something that we probably won't implement in the very beginning, but as you move over to other payment vendors, that's something that we can do in the future.
So you would simply pass the sign-on ID and password?
Exactly. So it's a secure sign-on, and for the end customer, it's seamless. They don't know that they've ever left the site, but it is, it is actually a different vendor that does the back-end payment processing, and they're secure and PCI compliant. So being able to view all your previous bills in one place and pay your bill online is obviously one of the big features. The other big thing is to be able to actually understand your water use. So one of the things that we do for residential users is we let them know how their use compares to similar households. So these is households that have about the same number of people and a similar sized yard that they might be watering. And so, most people have no idea if they're a high water user or not, and so this really kind of gives them some sense of their water use. We can also show some recommendations. These recommendations are going to be based on everything we know about them, so they're going to be pretty smart and pretty relevant. So right now, this recommendation is do not flush wipes. It's not really an outdoor recommendation. In the spring, when people start to turn on their irrigation systems, especially if they have a large yard or have a big seasonal use, it'll be much more focused on those sort of water conservation savings. The other big thing that we can do, and particularly as Pocatello in the future might start reading its meters a little more often, is help them to help end customers to know that they might have a leak. So right now we can certainly do that with the monthly or bi-monthly reads, but in the future, if they do start reading, a little more frequently, that's something we can detect even quicker. And the big thing about a leak alert is not only to let someone know that they might have a leak, but to actually help them fix it. So here we have a little leak resolution flow where we go through these short YouTube videos and help people walk through their home and find the source of a leak. So this is the sort of thing that I'm sure people in utility billing do on the phone, or the meter shop goes out and does in person, but this kind of allows them to do that online. And we do know that a lot of people are able to self-resolve their leaks there as well. One other quick thing to show you here is we do know that those high bills are a big source of complaints, and something that a lot of people on fixed incomes and particularly worry about. So again, once we do have the more frequent reads, we also can help people to forecast what their bill might look like. So anytime there's going to be more meter reads than billing reads, which is something that you all currently have the technology to do, then we can let people know this is what your bill might look like, and they can actually set up a use notification if their bill is going to be more than it typically is during that season. So for instance, if they just want to know, even if their bill is going to be just a little bit more than it typically is, they could receive a text message. And that's really helpful. It just definitely reduces calls to the utility, but it also is really helpful for end customers who might need to make sure that they're not paying more than they can afford. So these are sorts of the some of the kind of features that are allowable for the end customer. We do have a few customers close by, so Ketchum and Ogden are both customers of WaterSmart. Ketchum for a couple years now, I think 2 years, and Ogden just launched this past month, and so they would be very happy to talk to you if you'd like. The other thing that I want to show you very briefly is just a few tools for the utility to use. So everything you see here is for the end customer, and I want to show you just a few quick tools for the utility. Before I do that, were there any questions? I know I talked a lot. Yes.
I had a couple of questions. You mentioned that there's a kind of new expectation with people about not interacting with people, and they want to do everything online.
Yes.
So one question I had is, does your software have an ability to let people go in and sign up for service so that they could do that? Is that something you also offer, or would they still need to come in and do that and then they can use this?
Yes, that's a great question. So kind of the stop and start or transfer service. So that is something that we do for a lot of utilities. We have what we call a form builder. So here in this, there's kind of a I want to, which is a catch-all for different things. So one thing could be, for instance, start service or stop service. If it's start service, it's actually on the home page because you can't log in if you've never had an account before. But for stop service or transfer service, we can put in a form and collect all the information that you would typically collect. If they need to upload an ID or something like that, and then that will be sent to the correct person there. So that is something that we can offer as well.
Okay. Do any of those other cities use that feature with you, or do they just mostly?
We do have quite a few cities that use that. I'm not sure off the top of my head if those 3 that I mentioned do. Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Is that included standard with your package?
That's right. Yes, it is. And so it's just a form builder, and it's a very easy tool. When we kind of go through the setup process, you'll let us know here are the 6 pieces of information we need to transfer service, and then it will just be one of these things that kind of shows up right here, transfer service, and fills in the information.
Do you have any statistics on, like for these cities that are using it currently, how much it's improved bill collection?
That's a good question. So I don't know that we have a great focus on bill collection. So we do know that it definitely has decreased the amount of time taken to communicate about bill delinquencies. And I'll show you here some of the tools that it allows to do that. I don't know that we have a good handle on kind of bill payment timing. But we do know it definitely reduces phone calls related to high bills.
And does that include reducing complaints from people? So
Exactly. That's the idea. So reducing the number of complaints overall, and then also giving people more information so that when they do complain, it's an easier phone call to answer because there's more information available to that end customer.
And I guess why I was asking about if it improves bill collection, because I was wondering if dealing with those things on that front end, does that typically help with collecting bills? Yeah,
I would think so.
payment.
Yeah. So we've found typically with bill collection, there's usually 3 reasons people don't pay a bill. One is they forgot to pay the bill, and so we certainly help with those because we can send up text if
The
your bill's
reminders.
exactly 5 days before it's due, when it's 2 days overdue. The second reason is that they can't pay the bill, and so that's a whole other issue. If there's low-income issues, those sorts of things, and so there we can help by providing good conservation tips, but there's not as much there. The last reason is that someone won't pay the bill, and that's usually because they don't believe it, they have some issue, and that's certainly one that we can help with again because we really provide more information on their water use. One other just example here, we also could show the water. We show the water use compared to the average temperature and precipitation. We often know that a lot of customers, they get a bill in October, it is for part of August and September, and they don't remember that it was, over 80 for many days and did not rain, and if they had some irrigation controller, they used a lot of water. And so just showing this information is kind of a good reminder of why that bill might be so high. All right. Really briefly, I just want to also cover that the other thing that we'll be providing is a lot of tools for the utility to use, utility staff. So this is an example dashboard. This is something utility staff will see, not that end customers will see ever. And it just has a lot of reports and kind of tools for the utility to both understand their data, kind of run the reports that they have to do to do their daily work, and then also to communicate out. So for instance, you can see that we are able to do leak detection. The more frequent you collect your data, the more leaks we are able to detect, but we can do it with monthly or bi-monthly data. And so, for any of these different reports, the utility staff can log in and see a series of pieces of information that might make their job easier. So this is showing consumption over time for everyone. They could also filter it by different meter classes, so if they just wanted to look at commercial meters. And then there's a series of different reports. So for instance, if they wanted to look at the top consumers in a given period, there's various reports for them to use. All of this data is usually something that they already have somewhere in their system, but sometimes the systems they're using are not very easy to use, and you have to run queries, and they're pretty hard to filter, et cetera. And so this is just often easier for them to be able to filter it out, view where these high consumers are on a map. They can zoom in, download it into Excel, et cetera. The other big tool that a lot of utilities use is sending out messages to a targeted group of users. And I'm just going to really briefly show this before I wrap up. So this is a tool that's really flexible and can be used in many different ways. So we've had utilities use this to communicate about rate changes. One of the big ways that utilities often use it is to communicate about things like planned service outages. So I'll just show an example there. This is an example. I mentioned that when we first start working with utilities, most communication is paper because that's where we start. But as you gather email addresses and phone numbers over time, this becomes even more useful because people often want to receive information that way versus a mailer, which obviously takes several days to get to them. So, for example, if you did have some area that you knew was not going to have water for a few hours because there was maintenance going on, you can send a text message to that area. So here, there's a little template, maintenance planned in your neighborhood, water service may be affected. You can let them know when it's going to happen. Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. And then one of the things that we know is that a lot of utilities know where an outage will be, but don't off the top of their heads know which accounts that will affect. So we actually have a tool where they can just draw on a map. It's going to be these 4 blocks roughly that will be affected, and then we can automatically pull out the accounts and let them know which ones we can contact via text and which ones they're going to have to find some other way to contact. So this is a tool that a lot of utilities use. Park City has used it to communicate about service outages, and other utilities have sent all sorts of things, planned and unplanned. So these are the kinds of tools that will just allow the utility to make use of that digitization, collecting email addresses and phone numbers, and hopefully reduce staff time over time. And it really improves customer satisfaction because people generally would want to know that their water is going to be out via text than, a door hanger or something that's not quite as in their hands.
Or just turning on your faucet.
Or just turning on your faucet and learning. Yeah, exactly. With the shampoo in your hair that there's no more water.
It might be hard to tell people that they're going to have a main line break.
Yeah. Well,
7 a.m.
happened.
Yeah.
But communicating after, this tool would allow you to do that during those activities.
Sure,
To
immediately.
lay out those expectations and communicate back instead of just being flooded with calls.
Give them a time frame, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I like it.
Have any questions for?
Questions, council?
No, I just want to comment. I'm really excited about this. I think
Yes.
it'd be a great tool for our staff in the department and also for the customers. I think it's great.
How many meters aren't read in the winter?
Well, right now, we're on that 5-year plan where we're trying to get all those radio reads on. So right now, we currently have 4,400 of them left to put in over the next 2 years. So we are going to be 100% radio read the next 2 years.
So that's a little more than a
18,000
quarter then?
something. Pardon?
About a quarter of them this winter weren't read over the winter?
No, it's more like 15%.
Yeah.
15%?
Out of the 18,000, we only have 4,400 that are. And some of those we are still able to read. This winter's been mild, so we've been good. We've been able to get out and read. So.
2 miles.
2 miles.
Yeah.
No. You ski.
I know, I do.
Okay, we
The
have
nice
another-
thing is we do have the ability, as she was stated, that we can read those when we get the 100% radio read stuff. We can do the drive-by reads and get daily reads, which is very nice for people who like to know what they're using during a month. It helps them know when they can cut down and things. So there's a lot of things that we're excited about as well going forward and things. So.
Good. We have another question.
I do, and I'm sorry to ask this in your presence, but Cindy, are there other companies that you have checked with that provide this same service? Or
I haven't, because one of the things we work very close with Steve Hansen. He's the one that provides us with our handheld equipment and things. And so I'd gone back to an Itron conference, and WaterSmart was at that conference. I was able to see it. And so, no, I have not looked into anything further. This one ties in with our already software, everything it pulls from us. It is compatible with Itron and everything. So just to show you what's out there, that was the the main thing we want to show you that the future technology for us is exciting for what we can provide the customer and give them better customer service and more information and things like that. So this is just showing you guys what it is. We haven't, came in to decide on any particular company, anything like that, but wanted you to see what's available before we actually pursue going forward with this. If you guys like what you're seeing and would like to see us pursue this, definitely.
Well, I guess I have the question that Meg's asking. We've seen the bells and whistles. What's a sticker?
We've seen the...
We've seen the bells and whistles. What's a sticker?
Oh, that. Yeah, I thought that's what you were asking. Okay. It's really, to get it up and running for their technology and everything is $21,200. And then that first year with the whole annual service, the first year would be a total cost of $46,700. And then annually after that, it is $25,500, which actually amounts to 12 cents a month per account for what we're providing the customers. And if you look at it that way, we're providing them some great services. It's helping us in everything.
Is that based on the current number of hookups?
The current accounts
So
that
when
we
it
have.
increases, hookups go up?
It actually probably lower.
I'm sorry.
So I'm
I
not
think
sure it
was-
would lower necessarily the...
That price
if there
does say
was-
up to 18,000 accounts, yes.
Current number of readers.
So if it went up to 25,000, that goes up.
Yes, a small amount.
How small?
Yeah,
I
what's
said we got
your definition
$1.42
of
per,
small?
$1.42 annual per account. So if we went up how many accounts,
Okay.
if the math comes out right, that's not, it's a minimal.
Has there been a lot of demand for better electronic access in your department?
It's one of those things that, yes, if you look at Idle Powers, they can show those the usage on theirs. We're just kind of behind, so we don't get asked a lot about the technology part. We ourselves have been looking at, we'd love to have the mobiles, we love the alerts. We are finding that our shutoffs are reduced the more we can let people know what's, if your bill is coming due. And as she stated is we can set it up and the people can decide too, hey, I want this alert 5 days before it's due. And I want you to remind me again the day before and so they can set those alerts up themselves. We can set them up and send them out. But so it puts them in the driver's seat a little bit more to help their own accounts, whatever they need to help. Anything that we do like that sure helps our payments, of course. And the ability, I think people get excited when they see what's available to this, providing just like those emails. It says when we don't even have 2,000 of them, and that's how we can send our bills out to them. People just aren't engaging in that stuff. We have a lot more people who like the cell phone usage. So this one provides those alerts and everything coming over the phone. Oh, so I've been wanting that for years anyway, for them to pay their bill that way. Because a lot of them are going to get that alert and they're on it. So for us, it's pretty exciting to give us more tools ourselves to be able to contact our customers, let them know what's going on. The leak adjustments themselves, for them to see their usage, because like I said, that's one thing. It's very hard for people to understand how they can use that much water. And we don't have all the answers either. And they give this, you can compare, people like to compare to their next door neighbors a lot. Well, I talked to my neighbor, his bill's lower than mine, but they only have 2 people living there, no kids. And this house has 6 kids, and they're, our yards are the same.
And the cat.
And the cat, right. And so they compare to each other, not realizing that that person probably has a lot more laundry and things going on, where this one would show, this is what would be expected with a 2-person or somebody that has 6 kids and stuff. So it gives them a lot more tools themselves to know what's going on. It did even show like the daily consumption would help them know, hey, we just came back from camping and boy, I just did 20 loads of laundry. Look what I used in one day, because the realization of, when it says how much water you're actually using it's hard to fathom.
So it seems like the conservation aspect of this may benefit a lot of people and us with the water use. And then another question I would have is how much money do we spend sending people to check and see if their water consumption is too high, and then going back and forth to the city hall trying to make sure our numbers are right, and then going back out there to let them know that we are right and that they do have a leak, and that we find the cat flushing the toilet. I mean, how much time do we spend there, and how much money is in it? I don't know that you could give that to us, but I think
It is
there's
time
probably
consuming, very time
some.
consuming.
It probably
because it's-
consumes some.
Yeah, it's not only us. They're going to call both of our departments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't, a lot of times we're both out there trying to find out what's going on. It's a lot of paperwork because we have to generate those work orders every time they go out. They come back. Well, the next time they get their bill, they're still unhappy because of the high consumption, and so we're back out again. Like I says, it's a process of elimination we go through. Bottom line, though, is we can't always find that. They're just high users.
Sure.
And
Roger's good.
Do we have a level pay system?
we do have a level pay system.
Okay, so this has the potential perhaps to make that more accurate.
Well,
It's
the level
monitoring a
pay,
little more.
it takes, we require a year so that we can see what the usage is. And then it's recalculated every November based on what the actual usage was. Anybody that just is purchasing a home, we're going to make some major, I'm just planting new trees, I'm going to put in all new sod. I don't recommend level pay because you get the same bill and you're using all this water and you never get a higher bill. It's very hard if they're not checking that consumption, you're going to get hit really hard the next year. This would allow them level pay users to see what they're doing, yes, to maintain. A lot of people that already have existing homes can do that, but some people get on level pay and all of a sudden they've just won that greenest year. That Golden Arrow Award or the greenest lawn because they didn't realize what they were using.
Well, I'm thinking that because of our collections and the feedback we've had there and the whole system we've put in, that if we could get more people on level pay, it reduces all of that. And the more that we're able to communicate to people, that helps them understand the nuance of level pay and consumption and all that, more it levels the playing field for everybody.
Level pay is great. It has its drawbacks, though. Really, if you.
Well, you're never going to be late.
Right. Well.
Except that one time when you have to catch up.
Yeah. Some people need to move the dates out just because you've got your house and everything at the first month they need to lose, and it's very hard to. Our due dates for our bills is where you live because we have our city broke out to 4 parts. Some people need to make payment arrangements just to move that out 2 weeks, which is great. You put them on level pay, our system that we currently have, it's an issue with that one. We cannot make payment arrangements for people on budget bill because it throws the whole system off. So that's just something we'd have to probably, if we wanted to go that route, is look at some way of finding a system that works better to allow if those people needed to move dates or see if we could move dates somewhere. Right now it's a problem for us. The other problem we have is as much as we like people to check their consumption on the bills currently that we mail and everything, a lot of people just don't, and they're very surprised the next year with the consumption that they've used, and they can get in trouble that way because that money is owing, and so it tacks on, and we can get in trouble with the roller coaster effect because all of a sudden they owe so much, and then the next year it drops it, and then they go up, and so
But you'll
level
have
pay
all
is
these charts and stuff that will augment what your record is.
This would help them in real time do that.
This would help that, what you're talking about, because just so you said, if it's going to go over this amount, it's going to alert them, and then they can give us a call and we can help them. So yes, this would go along with what you're
Every time you got over
wanting.
what your normal was, the established level pay, you'd get an alert, so you're being forewarned.
And that is the tool that's so nice, is because it does allow us to send a lot more different alerts than we are able to do now. So.
What's a typical installation timetable?
Usually about 3 months. Yeah, so we can do it in as little as a little over 1, but to allow the utility to have the time they need, that we give 3 months.
What would it do for your department, Justin?
Well, it does a lot for us as far as explaining, the water usage. Like Cindy says, a customer will come in and they can't believe that they've used that much water in April, but they forget that, the warmer temperatures that we had. Maybe we had a warmer spring than the year before, and they can't remember some of that data. And so being able to compare that against your own demographics within our area instead of giving them a general statement helps in those communication tools, and it gives them that information up front. Today we live in the information age. A lot of people expect to have data. They want to understand it. They want to know that up front. They want to be alerted if they have a leak. They want to know, when a planned outage was. I didn't receive a mail. Why wasn't I called? Things like that. This has those tools to reach out to those customers and really engage them on a one-to-one basis. And like you brought up yesterday with the leak, we would have been able to notify based on the valves that we had isolated to close out that leak, and then send a personal message out that says, what the expectation is, how long the duration, how long we expect that, instead of receiving, a flood of calls of 50 to 60 people saying, when am I going to be turned back on? And so, anyways, a lot of communication tools. We feel like it's a good value of supplying that. There's also on the back end, this also drives data for better decisions. We work with computerized models of planning activities and various things. So being able to see how customers utilize their water at different times of year, knowing what individual user utilizes versus a family, and where those accounts are lying within communities. It kind of helps give more accuracy into various portions of town, knowing where we need to focus on improvements or other things. So, I think there's a lot of value just with the data alone. And then, like they've said before too, on the reporting side of things, the staffing time to drive some of those reports. A lot of this is driven on the back end. It's customized. It's already, you've got those customized templates and everything else. And so the access, it can be real time. And so you can pull up that information.
Well, one of the things I like about it is it challenges us to build in greater redundancies, because we'll look at text, we'll look at email, we'll look at all those type of things. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the criticisms we've got in some of the other areas about notification. So the more we're able to concentrate and be focused on those redundancies, the less we get in terms of complaints, and better customer awareness we generate.
People have different methods they prefer to be contacted by, and this covers them all.
Yeah.
But you were also saying that as far as if they wanted a refund, or if they actually did have a problem that they needed to get addressed, that if they could prove they had gotten alerts, that then they could actually
That's right. So yeah,
be eligible.
Exactly. So some of the best practices we've seen from cities, and these aren't things that we told them to do, they did on their own, were things like, for a bill adjustment, if you want one now, you have to show me that you have signed up. Not that you had signed up in the past, but more for the future that you signed up. So you're not getting a bill adjustment in the future, because you'll know via text that you were going over.
And the other side of that is that if we've got them signed up and we've given them notice and notice and notice,
then,
and they come in 2 months later and say, it's just out of sight, and we say, there's not a lot we can do, because we've been trying to get you in and trying to talk to you, and you shut us out.
And all of those are noted. So if you look up any user, you'll be able to see any of the history of alerts that they've received in the past. So they will give that one-time alert, but then in the future, if they have any activity here, so here's an example, some text messages that they received, then maybe they don't get the alert this time.
And people tend to get text messages and emails when they're on vacation.
Yes, texts, yeah, it's amazing. People are on their phone. And with emails, you can actually show whether or not they were opened, in fact. With texts, you can only see if they were delivered, but with emails, you can also see whether or not they actually opened it. So.
Okay.
The one other thing that I will mention, just because I didn't spend too much time, is we also do have a lot of kind of conservation-oriented tools, and I'm in Colorado, and that's something we've been talking a lot about. Obviously, it's been a pretty dry winter, and hopefully that won't be the case, for the next month or two. But if it is, then we go into that mode this summer, and so there are a lot of conservation-related messaging as well.
We might have to start watering our lawns pretty quick.
Yeah, well, there might be. Yeah,
That's for sure.
It's we went hiking instead of snowshoeing last weekend. So not what you want to see in February.
I was just in Denver last Friday, Saturday, and heard all that from the people.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, before we move on to agenda item number 6, we are going to take a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
So we will be back in 5 minutes.
It's the worst thing.
Thank you for joining us after our break. We'll go ahead and continue on our study session with agenda item number 6, proposed city employee education and policy administration changes. Human resources staff will be in attendance to present potential policy and administration changes to streamline the city's employee education benefit process.
Heather Buchanan, HR Director. So this is the shortest presentation I've ever brought before you. Please don't torture me with it.
We're going to hold you to this standard.
I know, that's what I'm worried about.
And the clock starts.
Right.
So I just want to briefly go over our current policy and then give you some of the proposals that we've talked about in our department. Our current education policy, they do have to be an employee with the city for 12 months. They must be full or half-time. We pay up to $3,000 for an undergrad degree or $5,000 for a graduate degree. A half-time employee gets $1,500, not the full amount. The funding must be used to pay for courses from an accredited university or textbooks related to those courses, and it needs to be budgeted for by the department head during the budget process.
Just a quick question. Those amounts, are those total over the whole time of them?
No, it's per year.
Per year?
Per year.
Okay.
Possible changes to the plan. I don't know if we're happy with status quo or we'd like to look at different options. One is a defined application process for employees that would be due to department heads prior to budgeting. This is a little not well worded from my end. Currently, if, for example, if someone in my department wanted to go to school, they would let me know prior to starting the budget process so I could ask for the money in the budget. It isn't technically a formalized application. They need to know what they're going in and that it's accredited. But there's no review of that goes through HR or finance that shows that yes, they have the money. In departments, it's an enterprise fund versus a general fund. The one thing it isn't checked is it an accredited university that's not going through HR? So ideally, I would like to pull all of this into HR. The problem is the budget, because you have different funds, so I can't just have a big clump of money that we then hand out. So the other option that might be better would be to change eligibility. Do we want to continue with paying for any degree, or do we want to go to job specific, like job related, a city job related degree? So I wouldn't pay for a pharmacy degree, but I would pay for a biology or an accounting degree. It's a big change from what we're doing. I don't even know if we want to consider it. And if we do consider it, is it for undergrad and graduate, or just for graduate? So if I'm working in accounting and I want to go get a teaching certificate, which is not a city-related function, and if they're going to leave employment once they get it, do we want to be paying for those degrees?
No.
I would agree. But it is a big change from what we're currently doing now. I am a total proponent of this benefit. I think it's great that people want to get better education, but if we're paying for it, I think it should be something that's benefiting the city in the long run and isn't driving them out of our employment.
Is there anything that would require a repayment if they left city employment if we paid for a degree?
So technically you can, yes, there's the ability. You have to, for every year you go through this, you have to give us a year of service, beyond, or some sort of tie to that. The problem is usually an employee's check, their last paycheck, isn't enough to extract that entire amount. So then you're in almost a collection situation. I mean, it works if they have a payout, but if it's someone that burns down all their time or they don't have a lot of time, you're not going to recover that money without getting into a fight. Option 3, revised policy. We currently do not allow departments to give funds, paid time, or travel for education. I mean, that's a standard practice. It needs to be clarified a little bit better in our policy. Another option would be to cap the total dollar usage, or to cap the amount of years they can use it. These are not things we have to do, they're just options if we want to look at some sort of revision. So if I'm taking 2 graduate courses a year and I'm using my full $5,000, do we want to continue paying that $5,000 a year until the person finishes their degree, 7 years from now, if it's a really big graduate degree? Or do we want to cap that at, say $20,000? So they could use the benefit up to $20,000, and after that, they would have to pay for the rest of their degree.
Approximately how many employees take advantage of this opportunity?
That's a little hard for me because I don't have Nicole anymore. This is her presentation I'm now delivering. I can say that we are spending just around $75,000 on average. That's outside of the budgeting. Our biggest users of education are police and then fire. They are covered in the CBA that they are offered the education benefit. Police follows our current policy. Fire has their own version in the CBA. But I think you can impact spending around it. We do have to offer the benefit. The benefit should not be unlimited to those 2 departments, but yet limited for everybody else.
Are most of the education benefits we're spending there, because fire and police, I don't know what kind of degrees help you move forward in there, but are we spending them on specific things there? Are we paying for?
So upon review of the information Nicole handed me, police is definitely using it for degrees. Under the CBA we signed last year, we did change the requirements to move forward in progression in rank. They do have to have a certain number of credits or a degree to hit certain ranks.
Okay, that makes
Fire
sense.
does not have that.
So what degrees what are firefighters getting? I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just...
No, we do have people over there getting them 4 degrees, but it isn't a requirement for some of the advancement positions at this time. So to become a battalion chief, it doesn't say I have to have a master's degree. That requirement isn't tied there. I believe to be a captain now in the police department, a BA or BS is required.
Are you asking like what programs they're going into?
Well, I'm asking what programs they're going into. I mean, because I have a degree in education. Is that helping me with fighting fires?
In my opinion, no. But
it might be, it might not be. I don't know. But
If you're a trainer,
well,
yeah, if you're a trainer.
if you're one of the main trainers.
I cannot affect how we apply this to fire because their contract covers this, and it is a very loosey-goosey interpretation of our policy. They use it for things very much outside of what the rest of the population uses it for. That's something that we would have to negotiate. This is just setting a precedent for the rest of the city.
Well, maybe I should focus off of fire and police both. I mean, I don't want to lump those 2 into as users because everybody is using this.
That's correct.
This system. Are we paying for people to get certificates and things like that don't help them or help the city in any way?
So there is no requirement that a degree has to be job specific or city related at this time. So if I wanted to go back and get a fine arts degree, unless there is something in the city that would be specific to, no, they can go to anything they want. Underwater basket weaving, you can get the degree, we will pay for it. And we will pay $3,000 a year until you achieve that with no caps.
I think the idea that there's a limited time that they can do this or a cap is a good idea.
Number of years.
Yeah, number of years or a dollar amount. I struggle with the idea that we have to control what their degree field is in. I think education is good wherever you get it if it's legitimate, and I think we ought to make sure it's a certain, a credentialed university or college. I also think that to control that, there ought to be some allegiance back here for a couple of years after you achieve your degree. Now, I know that's hard to achieve, I still think we need to get the benefit after the fact too for a while. So, there'd have to be a payback option, or they sign up that they're taking this, with the expectation at least 2 years beyond their completion of their degree, something like that. Some of us went through programs where it was 5 years.
If they sign a contract with it and you end up sending it to collections or whatever, it is what it is. But
yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is. And they're going to be making more money where they are.
Allegedly, yeah.
If that's what they're going to do.
Just as a question around that, so let's say I go all the way through and I need one course left in my bachelor's degree and I do not graduate, then do I owe you back money?
If you've used the cap?
Well, if we don't do a cap and we do a contract that you owe so much service after you would graduate, what happens if I just stop using the education benefit a semester before? So I get 119 credits and I need 120 and I stop using the program, so I'm not tied to the city then. I'm saying people are creative.
Well, I'm going to maybe disagree with the thought that whatever education you get, I mean, I agree that it is valuable, but I don't necessarily think that we should be paying, if Heather's going to go get a nursing degree and that doesn't relate to her position in HR, yeah, we could go back and send her to collection for it or something, but I feel like that might take away, I mean, if a department only has a certain budget and she's utilizing it for that, maybe somebody else in the department could be having some other courses that, I mean, is that ever going to be an issue for departments?
I think it's understood to be a benefit. I don't think it's looked at as a tool of the city, and we'd have to rededicate that in terms of this is an education option that we provide for the benefit of the city, not the employee, and you can advance if you use it. I mean, there's two different things in having the education benefit and having it be a tool of the city.
I'm just curious, what brought this up now? Is there a specific reason why we are looking at changing this policy?
Because I just went through the entire handbook and now I'm bringing in the pieces that I need more feedback from council on.
Okay.
Is this a reimbursement program? At the end of a semester, you pass the course?
You have to submit a grade and get it. You have to submit your grades and hit a certain point to get reimbursement. I don't just hand you the $3,000.
Okay.
Is there a certain amount of accomplishment they need to achieve to get that $3,000? I mean, is it 2 courses, 5 courses, or there's no level there?
No.
So they can take one class and get $3,000?
We will pay up to $3,000 for it. So if your class cost $3,000, we would pay just the $3,000. Anything over, you would owe. Anything under, we would not. You'd only get the minimum amount. But
Okay,
no, it's not. I mean, clearly this is not paying for full-time school. I don't know anywhere where tuition is this cheap. But if I took one class, I mean, you're paying a lot more than you're paying at a full-time rate. But there is no requirement to take so many courses, so many credits a semester.
So it's $3,000 to just be enrolled and accomplish a class?
Yes.
I really think whatever we do, it needs to benefit our employee on the job that they're in, or an opportunity for them to advance within the city organization.
So just to give you an example, I've worked at big private industry in town. I worked at AMI/ON, and then I've worked at the university. At the university, I could get any degree I wanted. But when I was with AMI, it had to be a degree that was specific to the industry that we were in. So they wouldn't have paid for a teaching certificate, they wouldn't have paid for government, but they'd have paid for business, engineering, accounting, IT. So it was, I mean, I've seen both ways, and I just don't know which direction council, or if we want to make any change on this. It is a great benefit, we should continue to offer, but you are also spending, $75,000 to, we're budgeting at $100,000 a year.
I was curious about that. Is there a reason that we are, it looks like each year we're spending a lot less than we're budgeting? How come we're budgeting?
So if departments come and ask for it and council grants that money and the employee does not end up going, that was still a budgeted amount. For example, if I have an employee in HR that wants to go and then they do not end up enrolling, that money still sits there. The next year I then either have to justify it again or it's usually pulled.
We typically, during the budget season, they ask their employees, anybody interested in going to school? Some of them will say yes, and then something will change, and then they'll decide not to go. But we always want to budget for that so that we're not blowing somebody's budget because somebody decides that they want to go without saying. We're not going to stop you probably, but if you don't say you want to go and things change, we understand that too. But this gives us a little bit of room for that to happen.
It just seems like we're consistently budgeting a lot more than we're spending.
That's correct.
So I was wondering.
But the weird part of that is, so if planning has budgeted $5,000 for someone to go to grad school and IT hasn't and someone from IT wants to go, they can't use that money. They have to find it within their budget. I mean, we can't just move that across the field for them to use. So it does, I mean, each department should technically be asking for like $8,000 a year so they could send someone to undergrad and grad, just in the off case that it would happen, to try to be fair to employees. But yet if you're a department that has constantly asked for, oh, this person's planning on going and you have it, I mean, some managers really try to make sure their budget comes in flat. Some try to build a little bit of a buffer. It just, no, it's not perfectly equitable. We're never going to get it perfectly equitable, but I think we can make it a little more even. But I have a lot of things going on right now, so if this is something you want to think on and revisit, or I'm just totally open to what you guys want at this point.
Roger?
I'm doing some math, and I don't understand how we have round numbers of 3,000, 5,000, 1,500, and we end up with 74,038 as a reimbursement.
Well, because sometimes if you take one class in a book.
Okay, so it's just a reimbursement for actual charges,
Yes.
not $3,000. Okay.
No, you don't just get the 3,000. You have to actual show costs.
So it's actual cost work.
Yes.
Okay.
And we don't pay for like graduation fees, but we will pay for a fee for a course.
Okay, so it's course and books.
Yes.
I think it's a great benefit, but it needs to be addressed before we complete the budget cycle this year.
Agreed.
So bring some more information with a little bit more fleshed out numbers and ideas, and then we'll go from there. But so far I've heard we like caps, we don't like caps.
So I agree with the caps. I think that's a good idea. I also agree with the time spent. If you take advantage of this, we want to make sure the city, you don't walk away the minute you get your degree, you don't walk away. We've seen that happen too many times. And so I like the idea of, I don't know what it is, a year, 2 years, 3 years, I don't know. But that we would have that guarantee or reimbursement, whatever that looks like for what we've spent for it.
So the contract to owe money back, how do you want that defined? By degree completion, by number of years used, by dollar amount used, credits used?
By dollar amount used.
Okay.
Would it be possible to get stats for a couple of years as to who's used it, what courses they took, what those cost?
Yes, I can bring you number of people in a department using the amount being budgeted, and then I can tally what degrees are being received right now or being enrolled in. I can bring that information.
Do we have an idea what degrees have been earned? Not that they're working on them today, but that have been earned that.
I don't know how closely we track that within our paperwork, but I can look.
I just think we need to be cautious as far as limiting what kind of degrees people can get. I think most education is valuable and adds to somebody's, it enhances their ability to do their job in lots of different ways. So we just need to be careful, because there are some degrees you might say, well, that doesn't apply directly to the job they're doing.
Not to the job they're doing to the city.
Right. But maybe it does in some ways, or maybe it also helps them advance within the city. So I think if we're going to look at eligibility and say only specific degrees apply, we need to be careful with that. that concerns me, that could be very limiting. One person could say a degree doesn't have anything to do with the job, whereas another person could think that it does have a lot to do with the job.
Well, that's why it would be defined by council.
Yeah.
You could go down this table and talk about degrees and what we're doing today, and I doubt
Right.
many of us have a degree in being legislators.
Right. But our degrees helped us get where we are.
Well,
so,
and students change majors and end up, I mean, few students graduate out of State University with the degree they started with as freshmen. Most
But
change
also,
at least
if I
twice.
was expecting the city to pay for my degree in city councilness, then I would have expected them to pay for like a political science degree, not a.
But if it's something, though, if it's something that will, as a tool for the city, I mean, we have a lot of employees that start in one department and they end up
Yeah, and as long
transferring
as
to
it's
another.
something
If
within the
it's
city, but if it's something
within the city,
totally
then it makes
that
sense
nothing
to
in the
me.
city relates to at all, then
But
that's
you
where
never
I'm
know
wondering.
where that degree's going to take
Exactly.
you within the city. They may be getting a degree that doesn't, in a field that will apply 10 years down the road that doesn't even exist today.
Well, it'll be beneficial if they're still with us in 10 years down the road, so that
Yeah.
they can use that degree.
Yeah.
But that's why I'm saying we need to really think about how we define that. I don't think it should be so limited because you don't know. I mean, degrees can have values in different ways. They can provide skills.
And I agree with the undergrad degree. I believe undergrad, we should pay for any undergrad that is from an accredited university. Graduate school, however, I don't think I should be paying for a pharmacy degree, for a master's in nursing, for a PA. Why those things are incredibly valuable, they have no application to the city. And
It's
they
like
will not stay.
we're asking somebody to.
Let us
quit.
educate you out of
Yeah.
what we can provide you
Yeah.
opportunity-wise.
Yeah.
And I think when it's very specific
that's
like that,
exactly what it is.
I would agree.
Could be good too.
I'm just saying we should use caution.
We're going to force them to go to graduate school.
Well, I think that's a good point. The undergrad and the grad, I think, are two different things, and so.
I agree.
But it has to be a degree specific, right?
Well, I would recommend it for a master's or a PhD, but not for an undergrad. So if I wanted to get, if I wanted to be a fine arts major and play a guitar, if the city pays for undergrads, I would pay for that. If I want to get a master's in that, I would say, no, the city's not paying for that. There's a difference between the two different levels of education where I think you could apply a different standard.
The reason I ask degree specific, there are many specialized courses that are offered by Idaho State. Fly fishing, Dutch oven cooking, a lot of things like that. Do we pay for those courses?
Yes, if they are
If you're
within.
Parks and Rec, you do.
No. So for an undergrad, there's so many credits required for my course. So I have a degree in English for my undergrad. Let's say 100 of those had to be exactly degree specific or generals.
And you have electives.
Then you have electives. We would pay for the course and we would pay for books, but you would not pay for supplies for fly fishing. So yes, if it's under the degree and it helps them get the credits they need, we will pay for it.
Okay, how about non-credit courses that are offered? For example, there's a non-degree specialization. We get a flyer every year of special classes that are offered just for community interest, such as Dutch oven cooking.
Those are through continuing ed.
Right, through continuing ed.
Continuing ed isn't accredited.
That's not
Okay.
degree.
So that would not be covered under
That's
this.
what I was asking. Thank you for helping me to ask the right question.
But I think even with higher degrees, you could run into some trouble. Like you say, if it's a nursing degree or a pharmacy degree that is clearly not something that the city, a job that the city provides, that you're basically paying for someone to get educated to leave and go get a different job. However, what if that person wants to get a master's in English? And that helps them with communication and writing and all sorts of things. That's a master's degree, and maybe it's not in a specific field that is a specific job, but it could help them in their job.
That's why it would be
there's gray
related,
areas.
and I would ask council to define those.
Okay.
So related, like a government, we do not actually need someone with a degree in political science at the city. We have no job that is, you require this degree to work here. However, I don't think we would turn down an employee with that degree And I don't think we would have a problem paying for that degree.
So department heads are going to need to understand this in order to give approval to someone and budget that?
Well, it depends on how you want it. I mean, there's multiple pieces here. If you change one, you don't have to change the other. Like, they could get the education
These are
tonight when
different
it comes to HR, but it could still be budgeted for.
Okay, let me go a little different direction. Now, Jeff oversees some really specific things.
Yes.
And we have people that want to go to conferences to get education.
Conferences are training.
Training, okay.
We're
And
talking
we
about
do
paying for a
have
degree.
budget for that.
Yes, and so that is training and education are separate budgets. They have separate expectations with those. Training, we pay per diem, we pay time, we pay travel. Education, we do not pay for any of that. You cannot commingle the funds for a singular person. Like, if I wanted to go get like my senior HR professional certificate, I cannot use both funds to pay for that. I cannot make employee have skin in the game and pay their travel. I either pay for it all, and if they fail the test, well, then that's just too bad. Or if they want to do education so that I require them to get that certificate so they, actually study, I can't pay them time and I can't pay their way.
Okay, so I know we're working to clarify this, but I go to lots of things where I can take a course and I can do an add-on. There's some other thing I do to get a continuing education credit.
That's training.
Okay. So the credit I would achieve would be training.
So, and by credit, you're talking about a credit for continuing education to keep a license. That isn't the same as a college credit for a degree. It's very complicated, but yet it's very not. It just depends on how far we want to look into it.
Well, really, truly, you look at the training or the
Yes.
education. We're talking about the education
Education,
piece.
right.
And it's good to have that clarified, that if you go to a conference, that's training.
That is training, correct. And our department heads really do a good job at separating those. Once in a while, we run into a problem and we just talk to them about it and we correct it. But education, we all know unemployment's low. It's hard to recruit. Even with the changes we've made, we're running into people, you have a degree. If you work in the police department now, because the CBA, you're eligible for, after the first year, money. Like, we will pay you because you have a degree. We don't do that for general employees. So while it's a benefit, I mean, there's other things we're starting to do with education. I'm not saying we have to change anything. If we're happy with what we're doing, I'm fine leaving it. If you want to see improvements or constraints put on that, this is the time to talk about it before we get into budgeting. Otherwise, we're a year out.
One other question. We talked in terms of the budget of the department as contrasted with HR.
Yes.
Would it be to our advantage to put this all under your direction?
Joyce.
So Joyce and I have actually had this discussion, and ideally that is what I would prefer, is to house this budget within HR as a separate budget. So the department's money would come into that fund, and then anyone who could apply could go. But there's a problem.
Yes. Well, basically when I spoke to Heather about it, I said, remember, your funds all are distinct. General fund is the only fund that you can spend the monies anywhere. So if I budget for education and airport, it has to stay for the purpose of airport employees. It can't be used for cemetery, for recreation, or any other fund. So you have to keep the integrity of that. One option would be that we could create a fund, and I'm not really big on creating funds, so if I'm saying this, I think it has merit. So it would be an education benefit fund. So departments would be able to budget whatever threshold we allow them to. If they have employees that put in their request, and I think it's important that they have to put in their request ahead of time so that we know who has intent to take classes. We could create a transfer and those monies could move into that education fund. Let's say we get to October or December, because usually classes either in August or you have to pay in December for January, right? So the earliest in a new fiscal year they could actually start taking classes wouldn't be until the spring. But let's say John decided not to go, but we moved
let's say we moved 3,000 into the education benefit fund for the airport. It would stay there. Those dollars would stay allotted for airport, and we could keep the integrity of those dollars there. We could continue to move. It's kind of like a savings account for the benefit. Do you see what I'm getting at? So the dollars can't be used for any other purpose than for the educational courses, which would have to be approved, I think, through HR to make sure we're meeting all the criteria and all the qualifications that says this course is an okay course. It keeps a pot of money for each of the different departments, and it allows them to manage it, and it takes it out of the hands of the department heads. And so you'd have that, but you would have to move it into that, and you'd have to keep the isolation, just as we do for 952, for capital acquisition, all those funds. We can't use funds, we can't commingle them, okay, for whatever purpose, because of the designation of how those revenues were created in order to be expended for that particular fund. We have to hold true to that, okay? Does that make sense? I know that's kind of...
It makes sense, but you're not advocating that.
No, I'm saying if we feel really that it's really important for Heather to, and I do, I see this as an important thing. I think this is the one area that I probably feel fairly strong about, you know, having the control so that you're being equitable amongst all your employees, and we're also holding feet to the fire, because what I see a lot, people will come to me and they come to Heather, they want to use that education benefit really for training, and that's not appropriate, because training, you all decide. When you get into education, you're into benefit side, which we say, we will provide this to you for a purpose of furthering your education, right? They're two different items, and we need to keep them distinct. Doing this would really facilitate that. So I can see the benefit of it. I just say I don't create funds willy-nilly. That's all I'm really telling you. Because we have a lot. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. So, but I can see the importance of it with this particular purpose, because we want to control the benefit. I like the idea of caps. I will say that out loud. Because some people will go 10 years and basically earn their degree, and we'll pay for every bit of it. There's nothing out on the employee side. Why I'm okay with us helping to support and facilitate that growth, I don't think it should be 100% on the employer side. That's my take.
I agree.
I really didn't think that I would cause this much of a headache, but I'm sorry. It's just a big one. We haven't revisited it. This is a pretty standard policy from like 10, 15 years ago. We haven't done many revisions to it.
And I guess I want to go back just a minute to my earlier question. Maybe I didn't really ask that very well, but when I asked about why we're looking at this now, and what you said makes sense, because we're looking at the handbook and this is one aspect, but has there been any specific problems that we need to address? Has there been abuses of this, or?
It's pretty hard to abuse this, because if you send education through HR and we don't think it matches, we will deny it. We then push back to the departments or the employee, and we require more information.
We have had in the past people get a degree and then leave the city's employment.
That is not uncommon.
We've had that happen often, and so it's time to look at it and see what's going on.
So maybe there are some issues that we should.
Probably.
Well, it's a benefit we offer, but we cannot offer it to everybody. If everybody in the city decided to go to school this year, we could not offer this benefit universally.
No.
But yet how we're offering the benefit, I'm going to be honest, police and fire get the better end of the deal. They get huge chunks of money. More than the 50% of this budget goes to the two departments. They do have the most people, but the rest of the employees do outweigh them if you look at apples to oranges.
But they do use it, though.
They do use it, but
it's available.
But they also don't have to come and, everyone doesn't have to come and ask for it every year. They just automatically get that money in their budget, where other departments have to ask for the $3,000 to $5,000. Police and fire are automatically allocated that.
And 2 years ago, I think, is when we started doing the holdbacks on the retirement. The other one we do the holdback on is on the education. So they actually have to
go through the process with Heather, and then we release that authority back to them, so they can't use it for other purposes. So that was one way we did this, but I still think the separate fund is probably the right route in order to keep a pool of money, so that if an individual doesn't use it that year, then it gets isolated and kept for a possibility of someone down the road.
Well, and I think that having a pool that is centrally administered allows us the flexibility to address all the changes that are going on in education. There's so much more of it that is internet-based.
And we will pay for a degree or courses online. It does have to be accredited.
But I mean, there's just so much of that stuff. But it takes finding if they're correct. We need to have somebody that really looks at that and make sure they did the work and stuff
Well,
like
and
that.
one of the issues that we see with it from our side, from the finance side, because we pay for it up front, they start the class, they don't get the appropriate grade at the end of or they don't complete the course, then they have to pay it back.
That's only at ISU.
Okay.
Everyone else gets a reimbursement after the fact when they submit a grade. ISU, we will pay up front, like we cut them a check.
Yes.
But other places, you would use your...
So do they have to pay us back if they fly?
Yep.
Yes. In those cases, they do.
And they do.
Because they're not going to go anywhere, right?
Sometimes people, withdrawing or dropping a course is not uncommon in any educational situation. No. So it's the same with employees. Just because we're not working at a college or university doesn't mean our circumstances don't change. So it is not uncommon. Or to switch a course and then your fees change or your books change.
Are these amounts from fiscal year 17 and 16 that we spent, are those including the fire and the police?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would be everybody.
It's it's
this
the
is
city
everybody.
I took the cents off.
You took the...
And you're okay.
The decimals.
Thank you.
This is lacking sense.
Yes. That seems to be where this presentation has went.
I usually say pennies are not from heaven.
Thank you for summarizing that.
Okay.
It's a lot. Clearly we want more discussion on it. I can bring you some better figures. It's something you obviously want to entertain, so I can bring something more fleshed out.
Sounds good. Why don't you do that?
I think we need it for this budget year.
And I can bring that in March.
Yeah.
Because you're only going to hear from me like the entire study session on the 8th. We'll just add one more thing on there.
I think we ought to look at since we're looking at how to compete in the workforce, and we've done some things that way, we probably ought to look at what some corresponding cities do in this regard to make sure that we're not falling behind, and that is a benefit. Because that's what we hear as much about anything as the benefits. And so, know what some of the other municipalities do.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you very much. With that, we will, what am I doing? Am I adjourning this meeting to
Have another one?
to have another one? We are adjourning this meeting, so we have am I supposed to read this? All right, let me see what it says here. We will now take a break for lunch. I don't think we're coming back in here for the special meeting, though, because the special meeting's on the thing. And so we're going to go ahead and break for lunch, and at lunch or after lunch, we will start our special meeting, which is on the budgeting process.
The training.
With the training on the budgeting process.